Notice is hereby given of the meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7:30 p.m. on the evening of Monday, June 24th, 2013, in Westfield High School Auditorium, 550 Dorian Road, Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the Board and to transact any other business to come properly before the Board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield Board of Education on Friday, June 21st, 2013, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street in Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, the Town Clerk of Westfield, Alternative Press, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of the meeting. Dana, could we get a roll call?
Rich Matessa.
Here.
Lucy Beaver. Here. Ann Harris.
Here.
Mark Friedman.
Here.
Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Roseanne Kirstead.
Here.
Ginny Light.
Here.
Gretchen Olin.
Here.
Rich Slater.
Here. Gretchen, could you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Sure. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcements. Brendan, anything on your end?
Yes, this comes from the elementary schools. About 220 students and 15 teachers at Westfield's McKinley Elementary School hit the dance floor in the fight against pediatric cancer at the school's second annual mini-thon, dance-a-thon, raising $8,300 to benefit the Karen Research Fund. The fund was created on behalf of a child of a former Westfield teacher, Susan Glick.
I have an announcement from the high school. Westfield High students learn skills for coping with loss. Before the end of the school year, Westfield High School sophomore students received a lesson in, quote, good grief in health class thanks to a partnership with Imagine, a center for coping with loss in Westfield. The presentation covered a wealth of information about coping with loss, including losses due to death, divorce, moving, employment, breakups, and many others. Students learned the definition of the terms grief and mourning and discussed healthy and unhealthy ways of coping with loss. Health teachers Susan Kolsar and Michelle Spreitzer, who also volunteer as facilitators at Imagine, helped coordinate the presentations, which were initiated by Caitlin Costello, who recently completed an internship at Imagine and still volunteers as a support group facilitator for the nonprofit organization.
This is from athletics. This weekend, the Star Ledger announced its all-star spring teams and athletes. Westfield High School was well represented. In softball, we were named number 1 in Union County. Baseball was among the top 20 in the state, ranking number 13. The team was ranked number 7 in Group 4 and number 2 in Union County. Boys lacrosse was named number 10 in the state, number 2 in Group 4. Girls lacrosse ranked 19 in the state and 7th in Group 4. Boys tennis earned 8th place in the state, 6th in Group 4, and number 1 in Union County. Many individual rankings were also attained by Westfield High School athletes. We will include these on our website. In the meantime, they are posted at nj.com. Congratulations to our hardworking, high-scoring student athletes.
And this is for science. On May 23rd, 25 Westfield High School students participated in the Merck State Science Day competition. Written tests were administered to 5 teams of 5 students each. These tests were taken online for the first time in the 63rd annual Merck State Science Day. Each team competed in biology, chemistry, physics, integrated science, and advanced integrated science. Westfield High School received first place for total team placement of all teams in Union County. Westfield High School also took first place in 4 of the 5 areas. In biology, Jill Rosenfeld, followed by Westfield High School students Lucia Liu, 2nd place, Jorge Ledesma, 5th place, Isabel Ick, 8th place, and Elizabeth Gonzalez, 9th place. In chemistry, Mark Gillespie took first place, followed by Edmund Hahn, second place, Aditi John, third place, Jeff Marino, fourth, and Kristen Haug, fifth place. In physics, first place was earned by Austin Thane. Also placing were Edwin Gee in seventh, Sophia Schiffman, 12th, Matt Lupino, 13th, and Estelle Cervantes in 23rd place. In advanced integrated, which combines all of the sciences, Robert Cassie placed first, with Peng Ji Jin 7th, Melissa Shendel 10th, Adam Lepicki 13th, and Rebecca Jang 14th. Westfield High School students also placed in the integrated science category with Alexa German, 6th place, Brian Lawrence, 7th, Gabrielle Bleich, 7th, Julia Napolitano, 10th, and John McKinley, 11th. Mark Gillespie received a statewide rank of 16th and a statewide honorable mention in chemistry. Well done.
You too.
Westfield High School Awards Night. At Westfield High School's annual awards night, more than 150 awards were presented to graduating seniors. For a complete list of awards, please check the district's website at www.westfieldnjk12.org.
National Latin Exam. Westfield High School students earned top awards and recognitions on the National Latin Exam. Jeffrey Marino and Eric Nikolauskas earned a gold medal on the Level 4 exam, highest level exam, for the 4th consecutive year. And Andrew Stockwell earned a perfect score of 40 on the Level 2 exam. A total of 69 students from Westfield High School took the exam, which is given annually in all 50 states and a number of countries worldwide. A complete list of students who are ranked in the French, Italian, and Latin exams will be posted on the district's website at www.westfieldnjk12.org.
Keeping with the language, the National French Exam, a total of 34 Westfield High School students were awarded the rank of New Jersey laureates this spring in the American Association of Teachers of French Grand Concours Exam. Over 100,000 elementary and secondary students participated in the contest nationally, with 84 Westfield High School students taking part this year.
And one more language to celebrate our students with. Students from Westfield High School participated in the Italian National Exam, competing against students from 105 schools across 20 states. The exam, consisting of 4 levels, 4 being the highest level, was taken by more than 5,000 students. A total of 37 Westfield High School students who study the Italian language received recognitions. Congratulations to all of our language students.
All right, I have 2 announcements. The first, the next Board of Education meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 27th. In the meantime, we look forward to celebrating the graduation of our high school seniors tomorrow, and we wish the entire Westfield community a safe and enjoyable summer. My next announcement is a very special announcement. I'd like to do it from the podium. Tonight we congratulate the Westfield High School baseball team. With a record of 8 wins and 9 losses, the team made a turnaround that was quite remarkable. The team's run included making it to the Union County Tournament Finals before being defeated by the state's #1 team. The team made it to the state's Group 4 championship game before bowing to the state's #2 team. In tournament games, the team recorded an 8-2 record. This was the first time that the Westfield High School baseball team made the finals in both tournaments since 1995. Some highlights include the following. Senior Kevin Galasso had a 5-1 pitching record. Senior Eric Demers completed 2 home runs and a walk-off double in the North Jersey Championship games versus Randolph. Senior Jake Greenberg singled a winning a winning run versus Linden in the state second round game. Senior Quinn Dursey. Senior Quinn Dursey succeeded in 2 saves and started the rally that defeated Randolph by breaking up a no-hitter with a single. Senior Liam Devon hit a home run in the state game versus Scotch Plains, scored the lone run in our team's victory over Linden, and 2 RBIs in the sectional championship game versus North Hunterdon. Junior Brad DiMartino's pitching record was an impressive 3-1. Junior Chris Arena scored the winning run in the Randolph game. Junior Anthony Perconti perfected a suicide squeeze bunt to permit Demers to score, which resulted in the defeat of Perth Ambulant in the sectional semifinals 2-1. And let's not forget that during a regular season game, 6 pitchers combined to complete a perfect game. According to Bruce Johnson, it was the 3rd perfect game in Westfield High School's history. Congratulations to the entire team and their coaches, Bob Brewster and Brian. Now, on behalf of the Board of Education, I'd like to present each member of the varsity baseball team with a certificate of recognition. At the same time, Bob will also present our players with county and state certificates. So as I call your name, if you'd please come up to the podium and I'll enter your certificate, and then if you'd please walk up onto the stage. Let's walk this out. Thank you. The Board of Education congratulates the following. Mike Androkonis. Chris Arena. Tyler Bowman. Jacob Boyle. Jack Bunting. Jack could not be here tonight. Brad DiMartino. Eric Demers. Liam Devon. Quinn Dursey. Kevin Galasso. Jake Greenberg. Ben Herbster. I am told Ben could not be here this evening. Chris Hogg. Michael Ionta. Mark Luino. Brad Norris. Anthony Perconti. Matt Storks. And Jake Wasserman. I am told that Jake could not join us tonight. I would therefore like to ask Bob or Brian if they'd like to say a few words, and then we can applaud the team once more while they're up on stage. Great.
Thank you very much for having us here tonight. It was quite a run, to say the least. Obviously, the most important people always thank are the parents for giving up their time and efforts to help us, and we had some parents this year that were outstanding. We probably put on about 5 or 6 pounds per man this year with all the food our parents gave us on long road trips. I also like to thank my assistant coaches, Jay Cook, who's a volunteer coach, Brian Sloan, who was a pitching coach with varsity, and Ken Miller, who took the JV team to the county championship. And just quickly, when I first started coaching 30-some years ago on the varsity level, I was always told that seniors on a team are bad news. I'll tell you what, we had the greatest seniors this year. There are 5 of them. You heard the information, what they did for us in the state tournament. Right before the state tournament started, Jake Greenberg said, guys, we're taking this all the way, and they darn came very close to it. So these guys deserve a great round of applause.
People a few minutes to walk out. You want to test that, or it should be good? Okay. Yeah. All right. At this time, I would like to, give us 1 second. At this time, I'd like to recognize the public for agenda items only. Please note throughout the night, it's actually difficult to see who's in the audience, so if you'd like to speak, just please come by the mic and state your name and address. Any comments, anyone from the public who would like to be recognized for agenda items only at this time?
The agenda is so long. Is the SRO on the agenda?
The SRO is on the agenda.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Tony Cook, and I live at 526 Lenox Avenue with my wife, Susan, and my two kids, one of whom is a freshman, now a sophomore here at Westfield High School, just so you know who I am. First, I'd just like to thank all of you on the board for all that you do. I know it's a tremendous effort and a tremendous amount of time, and we're all grateful for that. And I went to this high school, my wife went to this high school, so we're very involved in the town and very committed. And so it brings me to the SRO, which is something I don't know every single detail about, so I may have some of the details wrong. But what I believe is the case is that there'll be an officer here with carrying a weapon. Is that correct or not? There's some debate on that. Should I turn around this way?
No, you're addressing the board.
Sorry, I'm like
Hey,
8 feet tall.
Mitch, yes, help him move it.
There we go. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, good. Sorry. Now the mic is 8 feet tall. So, we have a belief in my family that we're just not gun-loving people, and I don't know if this officer's going to carry a gun or not, but if they are, I just wanted to say for the record that having a gun, whether it's on a good guy or a bad guy in the school, any school, whether it's this town or any town, is something that my wife and I are vehemently opposed to. I just wanted to make that point. The second thing is that from the papers and from talking to some of the board members, I think it's about $100,000 we're going to spend on this, or considering to spend on this SRO. And I think there's a lot better uses for that money, one of which is to not spend it on anything. We're taxed very heavily in this town, and the school is extremely well funded, and I would just like to say for the record that if you have the money, you don't necessarily have to spend it. There are lots of other ways we could spend that money if we had to on other than this position, including good teachers, but I would prefer to see that money not be spent on anything. And the last point is that and I'm making an assumption here and I don't know whether this is true or not, but if trying to avoid another Columbine or another situation like happened in Sandy Hook is at all behind this, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't be, but if it is, I think we're just kidding ourselves that one officer in one school, when there are 10 schools in this community that are wonderful schools, could do anything to stop an event like that is just crazy. There were 2 armed officers in Columbine High School that could not do anything about those poor kids. The police officers responded within 90 seconds to the Aurora movie theater and were not able to stop 70 people getting shot, of whom 12 were fatally shot. And the last one that I remember is at Virginia Tech, the nation's worst ever mass murder. There were 37 people killed, and there was an entire police force on that campus and did nothing to stop it. So if that's at all behind what you're posing with this, and I think it would be with the best of intentions, I think we're just kidding ourselves and we'd be better off saving the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else from the public? Did you ask if there's a time limit?
Yes, sir.
No, we're not.
Not that I intend, believe me, I just.
Thank you. We are not going to curtail anyone from using the microphone when it's their time. So it's not a rush for the microphone tonight. We'll be here.
I was going
Just
to wait
please,
and
I'm sorry.
listen. My name is Stephen Gorlick. I live at 837 Carlton Road. Today was the on-time pickup of all of my detritus, which was nice. I wasn't going to speak, but the last speaker made me want to come up and introduce myself and tell you make some best points that I can, given my expertise. I am a professor at Hunter College, a PhD trained criminologist who is currently on the board of John Jay College's Academy for Critical Incident Analysis. We consult and study the impact of sudden high-profile acts of violence. And a group of us last year were, I won't say privileged, were prevailed on to go through an extraordinarily emotional experience of visiting Norway and helping consult with the equivalent of their 9/11 Commission on their horrible shooting incident, which really dwarfs many of the others around the world. I should also tell you, and I don't want to make this a biography, just a little bit of context for the kind of work that I do. I'm one of the editors of the Journal of Critical Incident Analysis and also an editor of the Journal of Gender and Violence, where my senior editor is Dr. Marianne O'Toole, my research colleague, who is the author of the FBI's first threat assessment that was produced on school shooters. And it's a document you may have seen. It's old. It's not up to date, but it's something I've been involved with. Mary Ellen is a clinical psychologist. The final thing just about me, and then I'll tell you what it is, how I feel about the issue, is that I also I don't want to overstate the case. I was a university administrator for 2 decades, and it was not the most satisfying, it was the most challenging aspect of my career. It was not the most satisfying. I was the senior vice president of one of the larger campuses of the City University of New York, in New York City. And I've had responsibility for a lot of people, including on the horrible day of 9/11. So here's why I'm here. I've watched the debate, and I have to tell you, I've sat through many, many heated debates, and if you set aside, I honestly believe, and I've watched the whole thing, thank you for the television version, if you set aside all of the the heat, I think all sides, I heard a lot of light on all sides, and I heard a lot of people trying to really carefully consider this issue. I've learned in these cases to look past sort of the heatedness of the moment and just to listen to what people have to say. And I think this issue was very well vetted on all sorts of sides. And I'm just going to add one little piece. As I said, my specialty actually is sudden acts of violence, including school shootings. While I was in Norway, I was a consultant to the National Commission that was studying their school shooting. And I had the occasion to meet with, and this is actually what led to my retiring from this topic as a research topic, with all of the young people who survived that incident by swimming off of the island. It was just shattering for me. Being a father and a researcher finally came together, and I'm pretty much moving on to other kinds of research topics. I say all of this only to say that these kinds of incidents, and especially their really painful aftermath, and how they touch communities, and how I look back at a community that had an incident in 1984 that is still trying to vet the emotions and the pain and the seriousness of this. All of this is to say that these incidents are on my mind, but they're not a reason to support a school resource officer, and I am here to strongly support the notion, the concept of a school resource officer, a concept that, were it sort of an improvised creation of a few people, would be one thing, but it's a concept that is well grounded in a lot of research and has a lot of effects that are extremely positive, including 2 that I want to emphasize, which I didn't really see emphasized before. But one of the reasons is not, if we are living in a real world in which the saddest thing we have to really confront as human beings is to confront with all our best efforts, the randomness of this wonderful but gallingly random universe. Preventing school shootings is simply not something that, if I were to have the opportunity if I was an administrator hiring a school resource officer, which I would look forward, if I was still in administration, which I would definitely want to do, I wouldn't even have those things on my mind. It's not because there are not at least theoretical possibilities that a school resource officer could, in an extremely unusual case, given the extraordinary difference in how each of these incidents has played out, might, in an extraordinary case, be able to have some kind of an impact. But that possibility is so slight that most people who work in the field, including Mary Ellen, who did the threat assessment on school shooters, do not believe that subsequent policy should be guided by an extraordinary but horrible and unlikely event. That a lot of places that we've gone and spoken to people we've spoken with, it didn't happen in Norway for reasons that are fascinating, wonderful place. A lot of places institute public policies in the aftermath that come out of the best part of ourselves, that don't want our children, and I have a 15-year-old daughter who loves this place. They come out of the best part of ourselves, but they are not necessarily successful policies. I support the school resource officer concept, and I almost wish, and it's an impossible wish, that it had never been tied to this issue of the school shootings. By the way, it's not that society, I'm not going to get into it at all, and I'm already getting god-awful professorial, and I'm embarrassed already. But I'm not going to go into, there are things about school shootings that people can be aware of. It's not as if society is powerless to do some kinds of things. I personally, as someone who cares probably more about the safety of the kids in this school as much as anything in the world, see it as something rather extraordinary opportunity that really does not relate to preventing something that almost always plays out in an ever so slightly different way that in retrospect makes it then impossible to have predicted in advance. Not that you can't assess threats and stuff like that. So why do I like the school resource officer? Well, it's for two reasons, all of the reasons that I saw argued so well on the television coverage of your the last meeting, and that I heard opposed last time. But I just wanted to add a couple of them. To me, and this might sound really sort of wishy-washy for somebody who's had to face really and talk to and work with people who have been victims of these crimes. But I most of all favor this, a police officer, a school resource officer, to promote nothing more than personal social contacts between police officers and students. If you look at the literature, it happens that, and it's surprising, it's just in a field where there's almost very few authoritative findings, the extent to which young people of high school age have often had an inadequate number of just social contacts with police officers stunned me when I began to look at the literature. And I also deeply believe from some of the literature that the experience, and I've seen the evidence that the experience of having prior social contacts, not social, and I'm fully aware that this is a position that would not be fully social in the most social sense of that the absence of, that the presence of casual contact with people in law enforcement turns out to be a subsequent strong predictor of a community's very strong ultimate support for school resource officers and for ease of interaction between students and police officers when it's not a social event. So you might think it's sort of nutty. I'm almost done. But I sort of get most excited about a school resource officer, in addition to the really important tasks they can accomplish, most excited about simply them talking about nothing with kids. I mean nothing in the, not saying nothing, but just the physical presence and contact means an enormous amount. I was just going to add a couple other things that I didn't see in the job description. Because of it's now long ago, but because of an enormous family tragedy involving a car accident, it's very long. But many members of my family were lost, a generation basically, in one day. I've always been enormously concerned about raising the awareness of driver safety and have come up against what is society's sort of, I think, understandable in an age of terror, understandable sort of lack of interest in driver safety when you put it up next to all the things that our children face. But I think that that is another area in which a school resource officer could be enormously helpful. Another area that it may have been mentioned, but I want to also make clear, because I looked at some of the statistics about exactly what kind of hazards really endanger young people across the country in schools. And I have to say that I shouldn't have been, but I was stunned at the extent to which even in the most vigilant school settings, fire safety is something that it cannot be emphasized enough. And that I would expect, were I the person supervising the school resource officer, that that would be also something that they would be involved in. Everybody wants safety. This is my last remark. Everybody really wants safety, and every person I heard talk on the last bit of the last week of testimony, I didn't hear anybody who said anything that in and of itself was contrary to the safety and well-being and concern about young people. I heard a lot of concerned young people, and I'm used to being sort of immune to all the heat and light going off. And I absolutely understand the reluctance to consider a police officer, an armed, trained peace officer, even with their training. I understand why someone concerned and who loves their child would be concerned about that also. I see a danger. That's maybe a little over. I'm concerned that especially young people in a kind of community like Westfield have an absolute inadequate number of casual, face-to-face, non-adversarial contacts with police officers, which I think are part of the foundation for how you build a trusting relationship in a trusting community, more than, which can then be used, God forbid, in the case of what we call a God forbid incident, more than some sort of dramatic gesture. So I care very much, I hope very much that you'll support the school resource officer. But if any of you see this as a solution to preventing, you know what I'm going to say. I won't say it. I won't say it because it's hard for me to even talk about. It doesn't. These positions can do a lot in community solidarity, but they're not going to in the end. I heard some great police officers doing testimony. They were really all correct. You're just not going to do that, but you can accomplish an enormous amount with a position like this.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public for agenda items only at this time?
All right. Karen Eggert, 125 Cedar Street. The first thing that I'd like to bring up is that there seems to be a lot of discrepancies and inconsistencies that have been going back and forth, and I just wanted to bring up with regard to the emphasis on the SRO for security and the emphasis for the SRO with regard to counseling, mentors, peer leadership, that type of thing. Dr. Dolan last week made it very clear, and I assume that she is well versed in the role, that it was not for security. Okay. And then Lucy Beekler went on to express how important it is that we need an armed officer for security. And I quote what she said. I guess she was referring to her school where she teaches. So she said, our unarmed security guard will be the first to tell you that his job is a waste of money without being armed. I almost fell off my chair when he told me that. Okay, so clearly she's making the case that one of the big jobs of this is for him to carry a weapon. Dr. Dolan said that the way that it's been presented was that the weapon is actually kind of incidental because he's there as a full-time law officer, so he has to have his weapon. Okay, so what I'm sifting out from this is that we're really looking for someone to fill the role as a counselor to help teach students and teens with some of these issues that are going on for them at that age. So if we sift it down to that, I'd like to ask the board why, in fact, then would there be any opposition to having a school assistance counselor who is trained for 4 years and perhaps even gets a master's degree, who's trained specifically in these issues to help teens. I would imagine that the students would be better served with someone like that than a police officer who's been trained only for 7 to 10 days for the entire job. So I guess I wanted to ask maybe some of the people that had, Mr. Galligan, I know that you had expressed that you were for the SRO. Would you have any objections to having this role? I mean, I take it that the main emphasis is to help the students. So would you have any objections, or is there anything that you feel that this type of a person wouldn't be able to fulfill that role?
Hey, Brendan, at this time, we're really taking public comments. You're welcome to comment on that if you
Okay,
want
so
to.
I didn't
Hang
realize. I'll just keep
hang
on talking.
Hang on.
Okay.
No, you can hang on 1 second. At this point, we're just taking public comments only. You're welcome to respond to that if you'd like, but this portion of the meeting is reserved for public comments.
Okay.
Okay, so I would argue that there would be no logical reason why someone who's trained specifically in these types of issues wouldn't be better suited. Getting back to the issue of the budget, I actually was very intrigued because I'm looking at this, what you have given us here tonight, and I'm seeing some salaries. School psychologist, $69,084. This is someone who's gone to school for 4 years, gotten a master's degree, and she's making $69,000, and we're giving a police officer $100,000 who's learning this in 7 to 10 days. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So there are teachers here that some are making $60,000, some are making $58,000. I don't see anybody here making $100,000. And quite frankly, I know that you say that it's 50% of it is the school, 50% of the tax from the Westfield Police Department, but 100% of it is coming from our tax money. And as the gentleman said before, my taxes are high enough. I'm paying almost $15,000 in taxes. I'm a single mom. I'm $14,500 in taxes. I mean, I can't afford to even live here much. And quite frankly, if we're going to spend $100,000, I'd like to see it being put to use for someone who is an expert in this area. Not a police officer that is intended, like that other gentleman said, to build up community casual relationships. I think that's a whole bunch of talking points that make no sense. Because quite frankly, when you get down to it, what is it? It's talking points out of an SRO playbook. And it has nothing to do with the reality, the day-to-day dealings of the kids every day in their school, what they deal with, what they need. If we really want to help the kids, we can give them someone who they truly can confide in. There's been talk that's saying somehow that the students are going to be able to feel comfortable to confide in the police officer. That makes no sense, to confide in a law enforcement officer and take the risk of being arrested for something that maybe they're doing that they want to talk about. So if we really want to help the students, let's get someone there who can really help them. And let's get someone who they can really confide in. And who they know it's not going to go out of the boundaries of that building. The other thing I have a lot of strong issue with, is the fact that this SRO is not going to be held accountable to anybody but the police department. Now, when we have someone in our schools, every single person on this list that I see making whatever they're making is accountable to the school district, but not this police officer. So we have somebody working in the police, in the schools with the kids, but yet the school district has no say in what they're doing. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I would prefer, obviously, to have someone in the school who is going to be held accountable to the superintendent or the principal, especially the principal. If Principal Renwick can't add anything or can't, have any kind of input, I guess he can have input, but it doesn't mean the policeman has to take it. That's ridiculous. And, honestly, I don't want to go on blind faith here, because that's what you're asking us. All of you, the board is asking us, and Principal Dolan is asking us to just have blind faith that this person is going to be just peachy keen. Everything's going to be great, even though you never met the person. This person wasn't interviewed. This person is a policeman, is not in the educational field. So that doesn't give us a lot of confidence. It doesn't give me a lot of confidence. And quite frankly, I don't see why it's fair to ask the public that we shouldn't question something and that we should just be have blind faith that this person's going to be just great. This person doesn't have the expertise. 7 to 10 days is what Chief Wayman had said what the training was. I was shocked. But I'm glad he was honest. And I have to give him a lot of credit because I think that what he did, he answered the questions honestly, he answered them forthrightly, and the more he spoke, the more that we learned that this position is not really vetted very well. The more that we learn the position hasn't been investigated, that we don't really know that much about the person that's doing it. And I think Chief Wayman was being frank, to his credit. But when he said that, I was shocked. And I think a lot of other people were shocked that somebody who has 7 to 10 this is training in peer leadership, whatever that's called, mentors, counseling, also to learn emergencies. They're going to learn about the building. This is all in 7 to 10 days. Now, with regard to any kind of a security issue that Ms. Bigler was speaking about, I can't see how a police officer that's walking around the school is going to have any effect on an emergency happening in the front door. If you really want, I think we need to focus out between the security and the mentoring and the leader and the counseling. If you want somebody for security, it would seem to me that it would make more sense to have a police officer in a police car outside so they can see what's going on, or to spend money on security cameras such that. If you want somebody who's for counseling, I think you need to have somebody who's a specialist, who deals specially with teen issues. And so that's why I'm saying I'm really very much against this for that reason. I understand that him carrying a weapon is incidental, and I understand that it's almost like superfluous because he has to carry the weapon. However, I do think it would ease the minds of a lot of residents if we had someone that didn't have to have a weapon. I just think that would be, another reason why it would ease it. But primarily, my idea is that I just don't think that type an SRO would be best served to fulfill the role that's been outlined by the school district. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other members of the public for agenda items only? Sure.
Good evening, everyone. Peter Renwick, principal at the high school, and I appreciate the opportunity to kind of come back and do a little follow-up presentation. We have a number of representatives from the high school. I think we'll address some of the issues that have been brought up tonight. Clearly, I have expressed my deep desire to have this position at the high school. This is based upon my own personal experience and also research, which you'll hear a little bit about tonight. I believe that I was clear at the last board meeting about the value that I see in this position, and I think that the position was explained fairly well, and I think we'll explain it a little bit better, and you're hearing a little bit more about it tonight, so I won't repeat that presentation. However, I've been grateful for the opportunity over the last few weeks to have a number of conversations with colleagues, faculty, staff, parents about this important topic. I can certainly appreciate that this topic needs to be discussed so that the board feels comfortable making an informed decision tonight. I'm very happy to report that the majority of the conversations that I've had support having an SRO at the high school, and they see many benefits of this positive role model interacting with our students on a daily basis. I think I'd like to clarify from my experience, it is not either or, it is security, and it is all of the other benefits that we've heard about tonight. I'll explain first about the conversations that I've had with colleagues around Union County and around the state. I have heard from many of my colleagues that either have an SRO or desire to have one. There are a number of high schools in Union County that have a school resource officer. Those that have one speak very highly of having this position, and I heard absolutely no negative comments from them. I think the comment that best characterizes the sentiment, this sentiment was by one principal who said, and I quote, "We just got our SRO back and it has been excellent. A positive contribution to our school administration and community." Those that do not have one, I believe that the sentiment that best characterizes what I heard from them was a quote, "Like most schools, we lost our SRO to budget cuts, but we are trying to get a grant to get an officer here throughout the day." I've also had the opportunity to speak with many staff and faculty members here at Westfield High School, and while some were not familiar with the position and needed a better understanding of the position, many had worked with the former SRO here in this building and were pleased to hear that the position was being reinstated. Several are here tonight, and you will hear their words. Those that came to understand the role of an SRO supported the position, and I cannot recall one person who I spoke with that expressed their concern with this position. And many did express what they saw as the value both for security and for the relationship building that I stressed at the last meeting. But most importantly, I have had a number of conversations with parents of high school students who called me with questions or emailed. Most called because they needed clarification as they were concerned with the idea of someone having a gun at the high school, a position, again, several have expressed their understanding of, and an important topic to discuss. Many were confused by recent articles and posted letters that identified this position as an armed guard, and they were reassured that the person carrying this gun was an actual police officer, not some hired gun or armed guard. I appreciate having these conversations, and in the end, there were several outcomes. Some parents better understood the position and saw the many benefits in having a police officer at the high school and understood the value in the many resources he would bring beyond additional safety. Some parents appreciated hearing more details and indicated that while they better understood the position from our conversation, they needed more time to evaluate the decision. And a few ended our conversation indicated they simply did not like the idea of a gun in the school, and we agreed to disagree. Like so many of the conversations I've had in my office or with parents on the phone, I listened to each person's perspective, and I appreciated being heard. In the end, each conversation was thoughtful and beneficial, and my hope is that after tonight's presentation, the board will feel informed about this position. Tonight, I see value in having the board hear from a few of our staff members who have important information I believe we should all hear as we evaluate the benefits of having this position back at the high school. I would first like to introduce Mr. Jim DeSarno, who is an assistant principal and is also on our district emergency crisis committee.
Thank you, Mr. Renwick. Again, my name is Jim DeSarno. I'm an assistant principal here at the high school. I am part of the district's emergency preparedness committee, and I coordinate the school security for this building. New Jersey Safe Task Force put out a report that came out in April 2013, and I just want to go over a few of the points that they made that I feel that would benefit our school. First, the state encourages the hiring of SROs, and some of the positive contributions that SROs can make to the well-being of the school community, in our school community, and there's just a few points that I'd like to cover. The report states that this can enhance school safety and security. It can help enhance the working relationship between education and law enforcement officials. The SRO has the opportunity to interact with students in positive and constructive ways. The SRO can earn trust among the student population so that students feel comfortable sharing information to help nip problems such as bullying, threats of violence, social media, such as Facebook or Instagram issues also. One point that this SRO, again, would be for the entire school district, but would be housed here at the high school. And that, with that ability to work with all the schools, it is centrally located between the next two biggest schools, which are Edison and Roosevelt. One of the issues that has come in the past few months with our conversations with law enforcement is the knowledge of our buildings. And having an SRO in this building and the ability to have a better knowledge of the rest of the buildings in this district would be a big plus in helping our administrators deal with school security as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeSarno. I'd like to now introduce Mrs. Margaret Teitelbaum, who is our head nurse here at Westfield High School and who worked closely with the last SRO. Again, a position that was integral in our community and one that was lost only due to budget cuts.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you about my experience with an SRO. My name is Margaret Teitelbaum, and I'm the school nurse at Westfield High School. I'm also presently serving as the health services coordinator for the district nurses. Having served in the district as the school nurse health educator for over 25 years, as well as a parent of 3 children who have graduated from Westfield High School, I'm very passionate about helping our high school students. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you about my experience working alongside and in partnership with the Westfield Police Department. The officers from Westfield Police Department have been invited into our health classes many times to educate our young people on topics related to personal safety, the dangers of drinking and driving, and the differences between legal and illegal drug use. These police officers are also called into the schools to assist us in emergency situations. Juvenile officers and the patrol officers from the Westfield Police Department have always been viewed as a welcomed presence in our schools. The Drug Awareness Resistance Program became an integral part of the health curriculum K-8 in the early 1990s through 2007. As a result of this program, police officers in uniforms were often seen in the schools and in the classrooms. From 1998 through 2008, the DARE program was introduced at the high school and incorporated into the high school curriculum. Westfield High School Detective Greg Hobson, a graduate of Westfield High School who's here today, and a resident of Westfield, educated our young people about topics related to law enforcement and the illegal use of alcohol and drugs. Students and staff responded positively to his presence in the school and many times reached out to him both inside and outside of the classroom. The DARE officers developed meaningful relationships with our community of students, families, and school personnel. For approximately 10 years, Detective Ron Allen worked at Westfield High School as a school resource officer. Because he lived in the community and knew the students and their families, he became a valuable resource for students and staff. As stated by the National Association of School Resource Officers, SRO programs across the nation are founded as a collaborative effort by police agencies, law enforcement officers, educators, students, parents, and communities. The goal of the SRO programs is to provide safe learning environments in our nation's schools, provide valuable resource to school staff, foster a positive relationship with our nation's youth. There's a specific incident that I would like to share with you that illustrates the importance of an officer's presence in the schools. The incident occurred in an office within close proximity to the health office. The student was speaking with a case manager and suddenly became belligerent, combative, and irrational. I was called to this office to assist in alleviating this escalating situation. Recognizing the potential dangers to all parties involved, I immediately called Detective Allen for assistance. With the furniture flying, it was obvious that the student had become a danger to himself and to others. It was frightening for everyone involved. Since Detective Allen was in the building, he was able to arrive immediately and defuse this dangerous situation. With the help of the Westfield Rescue Squad and the Westfield Police Department, Detective Allen accompanied the student to the medical facility. Thanks to Detective Allen's immediate response, most of the staff and students in the building never even knew this took place. Detective Allen's prior relationship with this student and his training in crisis management protected everyone involved. Reflecting on today's world and the challenges to provide a secure learning environment, we all understand the importance of safeguarding our students and staff. Westfield High School is not immune to the ills in our society. Prevention has always been the focus in healthcare, and in my opinion, the same approach should be used in providing our children a safe learning environment every day. A resident school resource officer at Westfield High School prevents and protects our school community every day. Thank you very much for your time and consideration on this important issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Titlebaum. And at this point, I'd like to have Jim McKeon come to the podium. He's a current physical education teacher, but also a graduate that worked with Mr. Allen. That was here when Mr. Allen was here.
How you doing? Like Mr. Renwick said, I'm James McKeon. I graduated from here. I'm also a teacher and a coach in the building. My feeling on the SRO program is I don't see any real downside to it. When I was here, Detective Allen was in the building, and to be honest, it was like having another teacher in the building. Somebody you saw every day, somebody you recognized, and somebody you got to see outside of the building, and you had a relationship with him. I can go far back as into elementary school or middle school when Officer Hobson was our DARE teacher. Till this day I see him, and I still think of the DARE classes. I think it's just a relationship building with an officer is a great thing for any children. The number one thing for a parent is safety. But I like to put some points as a teacher. As a teacher, I do feel vulnerable at times after hearing, what goes on you see on the news, what's happened in recent history. Having someone that's in the building will allow teachers to feel safe in their classrooms and focus on creating a classroom environment conducive to learning, because they will know that there is somebody in the building that is monitoring the school at all times for their safety. As a coach, we travel to a lot of different areas. Sometimes we need extra security. Having somebody that's already in the building that the kids feel comfortable with, that they know, bring that security with us to those certain places, make them feel a little bit safer. I just want to tell my points. I think it's a great idea to have somebody in the building that can relate to the kids, make the kids feel safe. It's one less stress thing that they have to think about. The high school kids have a lot of things going on in their mind. The last thing they have to worry about is if they're safe or not. And I think to this day, I still have a relationship with Detective Allen, and it's a great relationship because of how I met him in this building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKeon. We're really all very grateful for this opportunity. I'm also grateful for all three that have presented. They're involved, all of them tomorrow in graduation, but we wanted to be here tonight because we feel passionately about this topic. As I conclude my comments, I'd like to ask the board to consider a few final thoughts. This is not something that we're moving forward with blind faith. What we're telling you is we have experience, all of us, with an SRO, or we've done research about them. They have proven value beyond the safety. Again, it is safety plus resources. And just as important as the safety, if not more so, are the relationship building between the students, the staff, and the police. This is the reinstatement of a position that was highly successful with no problems that I've ever heard of, and was very well received by the community. I am grateful, as has been discussed, that we now have the opportunity to partner with the police to bring this valuable position back to Westfield High School. Just quickly to address the concern that was raised, I believe, by the prior speaker, the relationship that I had with the SRO in the prior school that I was at, it was a partnership. I do not, as the principal of this building, feel that I would have any issue talking to Chief Wayman or to Dr. Dolan about the value, not only the value of the position and how we could make it better, but also with any potential concerns. I see this as a partnership. The value of having a trained police officer in the building will not only deter acts of violence, but they will be, as we've heard, immediately available to address any potential threat. The safety of our students and staff has always been paramount, and as research bears and the New Jersey Department of Ed suggests, the SRO will only improve safety in this building. And finally, the SRO is not only a trained police officer, but he will receive additional training to become a licensed school resource officer. So the training that they will receive is in addition to their normal training as a police officer. someone who I, again, believe will add great value to our school community beyond the obvious safety issues that we've discussed here tonight. I very much appreciate your time. I hope that you will vote on this issue tonight, and we can look forward to having this person in the building in September. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich?
Anyone else from the public?
Rich, can I ask questions, since this is, obviously they're from the school. I didn't know they'd be speaking, but I would rather ask the questions while they're here if they're leaving.
Peter? Are you still here? I'm here.
I just have a couple of questions. They're members of our staff, so I feel like it's okay for me to ask them now.
All right, well, I sent them. So I'll be here.
It's fine. You're fine. Couple questions, Peter. So, do students and staff feel less safe than they did today than when the officer was there 5 years ago?
Do they feel less safe? I have not done that survey, but what I can tell you is that they enjoyed having the SRO in the school.
Has there been an increase in the number of crimes, incidents reported in school? What kind of data do we have on that?
We could certainly look at that, but again, answering the question about the way that it feels, the people that I've talked to that have worked with the school resource officer enjoyed that relationship.
Okay. All right, well, my question is then why press ahead if we don't have this data?
Well, this is...
I think this is critical. I'd like to hear the data.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question for Peter? Peter, thank you for coming. Good luck tomorrow night.
I look forward to seeing you.
Anyone else from the public with comments or questions on agenda items only?
Vivian Levy, 5 Westbrook Road. I had already spoken at the last meeting. I also wrote a letter to the board and a letter to the patch. And as stated before, this position that you are recreating is very, very vague. The job description is huge. It goes all over the place, and it deals with too many issues. So on the one hand, really, what we would need is an assistant counselor of some sort, a person trained to mentor and counsel teens who knows all about teens' problems and concerns. And on the other hand, if you are for security building issues, you can always add monitor apps, electronic gadgets, can very easily be installed. But an armed officer is not what is needed. And I hope you will reconsider this issue and that you will not rush, because summer vacation is starting soon and a lot of people will be going away. I hope that you will reconsider all of these issues and talk it over again and not rush into taking a decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Blake, Carlton Road. And we keep hearing that the officer would be answering directly to his chief, which is quite normal. What I wanted to find out was what arrangements the town has, or any member of the town, with the school board or any member of the school board concerning any restrictions on the officer. I can tell you from personal experience, quite a number of years ago, there was a time when the police entered the schools at the invitation of the principal only. When something occurred, the Board of Education would investigate first, and I was told at one point in representing the victim of an assault that if the board's investigation felt it was criminal, they would call the police. And I ended that rather quickly. Now, I have no doubt that the officer will take orders from his chief. If he's walking down the hall and sees one of your children pushing drugs, is he going to arrest him? Does he have to go to the principal? is there any instructions to him whatsoever, either through his chief or in any way, that he is to act differently inside a school than he would out on the street? I think it's important for everybody to know. I have no objection to policemen in the school. No objection to armed policemen in the school. If you wanted to ask the police to put it on the list of things to be patrolled, and you would have throughout the day patrolmen coming into the various schools as they patrol the rest of the town, I have no objection to that, and the children can interact with all of the police department and the minor amount of extra education the SRO is supposed to get really probably would be offset by the $50,000 that you'd save and the $50,000 the town would save. You wouldn't have to hire anybody new or allocate any salaries. Just say, put us on the list, and who's ever patrolling this side, tell them to come into the school 2 or 3 times a day. I have no problem with cameras, etc., all of which are going to make you far more knowledgeable about what's going on and will probably stop bullying far more when the kids start realizing that their acts of bullying are now being caught on camera, as will all the other illegal acts that may or may not be going on. However, I do have a problem with restrictions on the policeman, and where he is allowed to act in one way on the street, but as an SRO, he is expected to tone down or do things that might not be popular with the parents in the way of enforcement of the laws as they think it should be done. And I'd like to find out if there has been any conversations or indications that the officer will act differently here than he would on the street.
So actually, for many years, there has been a memorandum. Sure. Okay, so for many years, all of the districts in Union County annually approve a memorandum of agreement between the schools and law enforcement, which spell out all of that which you're talking about in any situation, whether the police officer happens to be walking in the school, maybe they're stopping by to visit the office, maybe they're in for another reason, or whether it is an SRO. It is spelled out. That is an agreement that is signed every year between the police department and the school district, and is reviewed by the Board of Education as well every year. It's on the agenda every year. So it is completely spelled out there, and this would not change that. The same rules that they follow now would be used when there was an SRO officer in the building.
May I ask whether or not the actions of the officer pursuant to this memorandum is different in the school than he is outside?
I think the difference really is when there is an issue in a school. In general, it is the administration of the building who will begin the investigation, because we work under a different level than police officers do, and that will not change. Administrators in the school will investigate it first, because we have a different level of what we have to prove in order to investigate. A lower threshold than the police officers. So that really, honestly, it didn't change when we had an SRO previously, and it doesn't change now when we don't have an SRO officer.
Then why don't you hire a retired officer at a lesser price and do away with the problem of him being armed?
So I'm not sure if we're really going to get back and forth, but I'll just answer that briefly if I could. Just briefly, and I'm not going to get into back and forth after that. And actually, one of the reasons is the state has made it clear that they do not believe that is a good thing to do, that the research the state has done is that an SRO is very beneficial, retired officer is not, unarmed guard is not, but a school resource officer is a good use and is effective. And we're following actually guidance that comes from the New Jersey Department of Education, from the most recent state task force on this. So that really is why.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
My name is Marie Sloan. I'm at 373 Orange Circle. People that know me know that I'm not a political person. I'm pretty even-tempered. I don't have a gun. I don't like guns. I don't have a personal need for a gun. However, I do believe that everyone deserves a chance to voice his or her own opinion, and I'd like to share with you my personal opinion, my personal point of view, just as a parent of 2 rising 10th graders at Westfield High School on the proposed SRO position. I do not have an issue with the SRO, who is a trained police officer, being armed in Westfield High School. In fact, whenever Officer Gary Moore visited the children under the DARE program, I believe he was armed. I've asked my kids about that, and they said they did not even remember if he had a gun. My children and many of their friends loved when Officer Moore came to their school and believed the DARE program was very worthwhile. Westfield High School has almost 2,000 people in it during the day. From what I understand, the main role of the SRO is not just strictly security in the classical sense, but any technology that is being put into the Westfield High School for security purposes must have a human element to ensure and monitor its effectiveness. And I would think that the SRO would be the best person to do that. And yes, I do believe that an SRO has a better chance of stopping an unwelcomed intruder versus a teacher on hallway duty. And so does the Newtown, Connecticut School District, as they are planning to put SROs in all their schools next year. Now, do I have an issue about the $50,000 that would come out of the Board of Education budget? Is that too much? I thought I read that the hockey coaches will now be a paid position for $12,000. How many hockey players are there? Is that a good use of $12,000? $50,000 for SRO for the entire Westfield High School population, not to mention visits to the other schools, seems reasonable and in line with what I've read other school districts pay as they share with their own police departments. Perhaps a valid question is, what's the next item on the list if the SRR is not funded? Yet, I do not believe the public should try to micromanage the BOE budget. You all have been elected to do that and have put in many selfless hours, I trust, going over it. And did you know that Newtown, Connecticut is a district of about 5,000 students, 1,700 at their high school, so it's slightly smaller, and they're budgeting $380,000 out of a $73 million budget for security personnel salaries. Am I concerned that there will be a police state at the high school? No, but I would like to have a better understanding of the role and responsibility of the SRO versus the school administration. The SRO should not be involved with the normal school disciplinary issues. I would like to see examples of how the situations would be handled, perhaps the memorandum where this is all spelled out, and also would like to have those documented on the school website. I've only heard good things about the past officer in this position at Westfield High School and would hope we could find a worthy replacement. Being a positive role model who is approachable by the students, staff, and parents is vital. I believe it's time we start acting proactively rather than reactively. What I mean is an SRO is an investment in our children, as he would also be providing in-classroom instruction on law enforcement topics and prevention programs. Aren't we supposed to be educating the whole child? The Westfield High School mission statement says, "The heart of our purpose is to reinforce ethical responsibility and promote personal integrity." If the SRO can help one child from carrying out a bad or horrific deed that could have ramifications on his or her own life or others, isn't that worthwhile? If this SRO can intervene and stop or prevent a conflict or a bullying situation or physical or drug abuse or an assault because he is accessible and has gained the trust of the students, isn't that worthwhile? And if the SRO is not hired and any of these circumstances I mentioned occur and lead to a serious injury or death, what price tag do we put on those victims? No one pays attention to the trees around the school until an unspeakable tragedy occurs. No one pays attention to the crosswalks and pedestrian safety in town until numerous accidents and deaths occur. Why must we wait for a tragedy to occur at Westfield High School before reinstating a position or program that has already proven to be successful in the past? I believe we were all here for the same goal, keeping our kids safe, whether that's from a very rare outside intruder or an inside self-inflicted danger. I believe a school resource officer is in a unique position to help us do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Hi, I had actually thought I was going to wait until...
Name and address, please.
My name is Jonathan Blitt, 236 Grove Street. I have 2 children in elementary school, not in high school, by the way. What we've heard so far are a bunch of people who have children in high school or some that actually work in high school, and yet we live in a school district that has 10 schools, one of which is the high school. There are a few questions that I had, and I'm only going to briefly touch on some of the things I want to say later because we can speak directly with you at that time. The first is, we heard the principal bring someone up who had mentioned that the SRO position would be acquainted with the layout of the schools, correct? And that would be one of the benefits of having an SRO position. I'd like to say that if the Westfield Police Department doesn't already have a very clear and concise understanding of our schools, then that's gross negligence. And I pretty much guarantee that that's not the case. I would almost guarantee that they're all pretty familiar with the layout of the schools. Second, we heard someone speak very highly about the DARE program. And what I haven't heard is any dialogue whatsoever in respect to the SRO position relative to the DARE position. The DARE position, as many of us know and some maybe don't know, was canceled due to a lack of funding. The DARE program, of course, had wide-ranging effect, and everybody can agree on its efficacy. Lastly, before I sit down and come back up later, I think that there are 4 distinct groups of people here today, all of which you guys need to talk to. The first of which is in favor of the reinstatement of this position. The second of which you've heard is opposed. The third of which, and I believe that a lot of people here fall into this category, are here to learn more about the position. And then there's a 4th spot. There's a 4th group of people who are neither opposed nor for the position. The position of SRO has intrinsic value. Anybody who wants to read and Google articles, and there are many, can find out what that intrinsic value is. It also has lots of pitfalls. The only question is, have we adequately vetted all the possibilities? And my concern, and I believe a lot of the people whom I've dialogued, is that we feel as though this topic hasn't been adequately vetted, that we haven't looked at alternatives. We certainly haven't heard you discuss them. What I would last like to know is that if the object here is to get an informed population, that is your residents, your constituents, people who voted for you, to understand this topic, and I believe it is, I think you all have the best interest at heart here, then why is it that so little information seems to be filtering out into the public? We'll talk later, but you've said that this has been up for 3 months. This position has been up for 3 months when it was approved. I'm assuming, since it's been up for 3 months, that during that time you guys have done what you would do on any major topic, which is go into committee and dialogue. And I think that the population here deserves to hear from the people who participated in that committee or that subcommittee on the issue.
What are you, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What are you basing that on, that our procedure is to go into committee?
I'm not basing it on a procedural comment.
Well,
I
you
know
just
that
made a very overt statement. If you
my
could tell the audience what you're basing it on.
Sure. My statement is merely, I know that you have taken it upon yourselves to go into smaller groups of people to further discuss topics of either great expense or great interest. Is that not correct?
We do that from time to time on different
Okay,
issues.
so
yes.
that would be a safe assumption that this topic being as contentious
So
as
you're
it is.
making an assumption. I just want to clarify your statement because it was a
100%.
very overt statement that was wrong.
Correct. It's
Thank you.
100%. It's an assumption, just
Thank
like
you.
the assumption that the synopsis done by the superintendent would be accurate and complete.
Okay, I'm just commenting on your statement in front of this audience.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. My only statement in conclusion is that without fully informing your constituents of the pros and cons of the position and how you've arrived at deciding the SRO best met your objectives. I'm sure you have clear objectives, because without clear objectives, you certainly can't figure out if it's been a successful position. I know that the last meeting, we had a lot of misunderstanding as to what those objectives are. It'd be great to hear them fully expressed so we can understand exactly what success in this position means. I think everybody deserves that. And in the end, we can determine if the SRO position is the best position to fill your needs, our needs, as a school district. As a representative of a lot of parents of whom I've spoken to that have children in elementary school and in middle school and in the pre-K, we're all concerned that any expense that we endure in fiscally difficult times has benefit to all students, not to a very limited population. I have more things to say. We'll talk about it in the proper venue.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the audience? Agenda items only?
Hello, my name's Lori Bennett. I live at 220 Jefferson Avenue. Okay, so I spoke at the last meeting, and I really just have the same amount of ambivalence with regards to this position as I did 2 weeks ago. I'm a parent of an upcoming sophomore at the high school, now an upcoming freshman, and an upcoming second grader at Wilson. And at the last meeting, it seemed like the board was describing this position as being one to serve a need in more of the counseling modality versus safety. By the end, it seemed like safety was becoming more of an parent role to the SRO. Certainly listening tonight, all I keep hearing is this safety aspect of this, which I couldn't be more supportive of. But then I ask, what about my child in Wilson? What about all the children at the middle school level? I'm also hearing a lot of mention about the former DARE program. And if we're talking about the SRO serving a purpose to maybe cut back on any drug problems that they're occurring at the high school, if that's why we're bringing back the SRO, why wouldn't we look to bring back the DARE position? We're talking about establishing a relationship with the SRO. Wouldn't it be better served for children at the elementary and the middle school level to grow up seeing this DARE officer so that by the time they get to high school, maybe they would really, in reality, feel comfortable approaching a police officer in regards to any drug issues? I mean, I've talked to my sophomore, I've talked to my upcoming freshman. They kind of dismiss this whole idea. I'm not saying they're representative of every student by any stretch. They're fairly social kids. They have rapport with their teachers. Their responses to me didn't give me a lot of confidence that if they saw a drug problem in the school, that they would necessarily be comfortable, or a bullying problem, approaching a police officer versus their guidance counselor versus assistant principal or principal, or a teacher for that matter, or a coach. So I guess I ask you tonight, could you clarify like why we would look at the SRO over DARE, reinstating the DARE program? Can you answer that? Or I missed the first few minutes. Would you rather talk
So
about
this
this
is
later?
still the public comment section.
Okay.
Nobody has waited for any sort of comments from the board. So
Okay.
we're here to listen to your comments right now.
So then I would hope at some point that would be addressed, because a lot of parents that I've spoken to, a lot of people have raised that same question. Why not bring the DARE program back? And I guess I'm also here to ask if part of the salary of the SRO is being paid by the Board of Ed and part by the police department, again, why can't we utilize resources we already have? And all of this requires a lot of money, but especially coming off of this year and in light of the news that this woman brought to us tonight about Newtown and bringing in SRO officers to the district, why aren't we supplying this kind of resource then to all our students. I'm sure the obvious is the money's not there, but why can't we amp up the patrolling of what's going on outside of the elementary schools and the Lincoln School? It just doesn't seem like you don't want to make this necessarily about public safety, but there's just too much that's coming up about safety and safety of our children. And I know at the last meeting, this isn't a Sophie's Choice situation, but I am a parent that has elementary and has high school students, and it feels very much like that. And at the elementary school level, the students are the most vulnerable. So it's very concerning for me. Last, I just want to point out that in the synopsis from the last Board of Ed meeting, I'm not sure exactly who is being quoted here. Reinstatement of school resource officer. I think this needs to be clarified should anyone in the district read the synopsis. It's stated here in the beginning when you're talking about the past SRO. He was a fabric of Westfield High School. He was not an armed guard, nor are we suggesting one now. Is definitely inaccurate, correct? Because you are talking about having this SRO as an armed guard. Didn't you clarify that?
The SRO is a police officer. Police officers in this town carry service revolvers.
So I think this statement is very misleading for anyone who's reading it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Sally Cohen-Alamino. I have a rising freshman and a rising senior. And I came tonight, I've never been to a Board of Ed meeting before, because I wanted to learn about the subject. I've learned a lot, and I still don't really know where I stand on it. Some of you know that my family was struck by violence on 9/11. I have strong feelings about keeping our kids safe. I think we live in a town where we really are safe, but, you know, we thought we were safe getting on airplanes too a couple of years ago. I will say this, the job description that I've heard is really huge. I mean, this one person who, I might also add, Chief Wayman already knows who he wants to hire. I've never heard someone publicly admit it was in the Westfield Leader. He was quoted as saying he already knows, he already has someone in mind, a graduate of this high school, someone who knows the town very well. That's alarming to me. That's confusing to me. I've never heard someone talk about a job and say they know exactly, it almost sounds like they're making the job for this person. That's very confusing. And to say that this person is going to know, is going to be able to cover all the schools and be there in every single corner of the high school. A lot of us in this room get really lost on back to school night. This is a huge high school. There's no way you can be in the front. There's no way you can be in the back. You can't be at Franklin. You can't be at Edison. It doesn't make sense. So I'm still saying, I give you guys kudos because you listen to all of us. I wish there were more residents here. But I really think that we as John Q. Public do not understand this position. If you're going to vote on it tonight, you're still going to have 95% of the people in this town not really understanding what you're voting on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public for comments on agenda items only?
My name is Gerard Callaghy. I live at 760 Prospect Street. I'm against the SRO position. I feel from everything I heard that 5 years ago there was somebody in that position who everybody loved, and the problem is he's gone. I don't hear much else about what the problem is we're addressing and trying to solve, except for that person's not there and everybody loved him. So now there is a person who everybody plans to love again, and they have it picked out. Everything's set up. It seems very preordained, and it's very distressing to me. If there's a problem that needs to be solved, we should be told what the problem is. When it comes to, is there an increase of crime? Is there an increase of drug use? And is there a lack of discipline? If that's not the case, then really, where is it coming from? And one thing that's been very disturbing is how confusing it has been between the security and the whole social aspect. It is the job of everybody in the community to treat the children the way we say the SRO will treat the children. And every teacher in the school and the principal have that same responsibility as well. We are all responsible for them. We're supposed to care about them, not just one guy. Not one guy in a building of 2,000. He can't do that job. Everybody has to help. If he's part of it, I understand that, but it is an expense, and there is just way too much confusion over where this came from, why this is important today. And that's why I object. I object to guns in the school, not that. DARE, I think, is a good program. I've seen that with my kids. And the cops come with guns. It's not that the cops have guns with them. It's just when you put somebody in the school and say, we need somebody with a gun in that school all day, that's a culture. We have this meeting here with us. We don't have somebody armed to protect us from each other. It seems it's just not right. And you don't need, in a community like ours, you don't need somebody standing there with a gun to keep us safe. You just don't need it. And it's a cultural thing. And we're saying that when we put a guy with a gun there and say, he can't work without a gun. What we're saying is, for some reason, we just can't be safe with that little extra thing that could put somebody down. And I don't think we need that in high school. Apparently, you don't think we need it in the grammar school or the middle schools. I don't think we need it in the high school. Anyhow, I hope you vote no, and I also hope everybody feels this has been vetted well enough. I do believe when it's done, there's still going to be a raging controversy. I think a lot of people are upset about the way this has been handled. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janine Moran. I have a quick concern. My concern is why the SRO would only be at the high school. The elementary schools are the easiest target. You walk to the door, you hit the buzzer, and they let you right in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gina Totino, 719 Hanford Place. I wasn't planning on getting up today, but I know there's a lot of controversy. I've done a lot of reading on the research on DARE, and I hate to say it's pretty conclusive that it's ineffective if you look at the research, so not a proponent there. I'm sad to think we're choosing one school to protect. Many years ago in my middle school, was attacked and mugged, and I don't want that happening to my children, and I'm not saying we live in a community that would, but we can't choose one building to protect. And I'm very against police officers doing counseling. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public for agenda items only? Comments on agenda items only?
Good evening, Kim Rhodes, 10 Webster Place. Most of you on board know me. I've sat in your position in the past. I've held many positions in this community. I've been a parent of a high school student. I have been on the PTO, I've been on the school board, and now I have a new position as a teacher at the high school. I think I speak for a lot of the teachers in our building, as well as for those of us in the community who remember the days when we had an SRO. Someone like that brings a lot to the community of the high school. Let me remind you that our building is now overcrowded once again. We originally built this addition with the expectation of having around 1,800 students, and we are now pushing 2,000. That said, there is going to be more issues in a building just because it's crowded. And I think people need to understand times have changed in a lot of ways. I'm not comfortable with people on the Board of Education taking a position on guns outside the board. I think all of you are here for one purpose and one purpose only. You are to protect and be in standing for the school district, not for people running for political office. So I'm very distressed by the things I've read in the paper from those of you who are now, I believe, involved in political campaigns. That is not what we do on the Board of Ed. What we do here is take care of our children in the district. Therefore, I'd like you to reconsider all this controversy and do what you do best, which is make a decision for the children in this district. I am confident that you, our elected officials, will do a good job for all of the children. Yes, in a perfect world, we would be able to have security in every one of our schools, but it's not realistic right now. I've been through this job when budgets have been tough. I've watched the difficulty you guys have faced, and I'm delighted that you, Dr. Dolan, with all your hard work, have found a way to reinstate a position that has been successful. When my son was at the high school, he found the existence of a school resource officer to be a positive experience, and I believe it will be one again. I'd like to conclude by thanking you, the Board of Education, and you, the staff, for all your hard work, which people seem to forget when you sit here for all these hours and hours and hours. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public on agenda items only? Comments?
Mitch Rubin, 252 Muncie Way. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but after hearing some of the previous comments, I thought I'd just want to make some comments. I'm very opposed to having the SRO. When my daughter was in the high school with the previous SRO, you know, she didn't communicate with the police officers. None of her friends did. I've talked to all of her friends. They don't think it's necessary. They don't think it's important. Who they did communicate with is Miss Maz. They all built a very strong relationship with her, and she and the guidance department, as well as the other guidance people, performed a great job and had the proper training and could actually give the proper guidance. When my daughter had any issues, when her friend had any issues, they went to guidance. They went to Ms. Maz. She is, you know, we put her on a pedestal. An SRO, I guess as they talked about, they only have 7 to 10 days of training. That's kind of a joke. These people aren't qualified to do that job. In regards to safety, I know everyone's really concerned, but that's not really a huge problem. If we want to address what should be addressed is really having someone who can help out with guidance and counseling. Right now, the guidance people are overworked. I've had 2 daughters through the system, and basically they focus a lot of their time on the college admissions process, which I do feel is very important. However, they don't spend nearly enough time working with the students. I think $100,000 is a lot to devote something to someone who's not really adequately trained. If we want to have people come in and talk about DARE, if they want to talk about drugs, if they want to talk about safety or fire, bring someone in. Someone made an idea, if they want to have someone patrol the schools, you know, patrol the schools. But if you have an objective, I would suggest that you fulfill the objective with someone who is qualified. My younger daughter, they had some kids over to the house. I asked each and every one of them what they felt about it. They would not talk to a police officer. That's probably the last person that they're going to speak with. I wouldn't necessarily encourage them to talk to police officers. I'm actually very happy that none of my kids have had any involvement with police officers. But in terms of the, at the school, they all had a great education, all of my daughter's friends, and they all had great relationships, not only with guidance, but with specific teachers that were mentors. Recently, a teacher gave my daughter a reference for a job in town. And those are the type of relationships that I think are really important. So unfortunately, I think this is a little misguided. And if we are going to lay out, I think there are a couple of really good comments, is that if you're going to have an objective and if there's something that you want to accomplish, we would suggest that you be clear about it. And because people have said is you're not going to stop a Sandy Hook or, you know, Newtown. Those things are difficult to do. You can't really try to do something that's a 1,000,001 opportunity. They had the people at Columbine, that didn't help. But the areas where you could really help and could really have an effect on the students is with guidance. If you want to talk about safety, I talked with parents, and there are several parents that I talked about. Get an extra bus for the lacrosse team. Right now, the kids don't even sit in seats. That's an accident waiting to happen. I have no children on the lacrosse team, but that's an area that if you want to put some resources back in, do that. That's actually something that can happen every single time they're out on the bus, is that there's not enough buses for the children. If you guys want to have an effect at the school, get some technology. There's not enough wireless cards so that the children cannot access the internet and cannot do their work. So therefore they cannot get things done. So therefore that has an immediate effect. So what I would suggest is do things that have an immediate and impactful effect. Not something that's a 1 in a million chance, but have something that every single time a sports team goes out on the bus, that they're actually safe. When kids are trying to put together their junior paper, they actually can get internet. When you need to get more math teachers. I mean, there's lots of areas where we can improve. We obviously have budget issues, and you guys do a very commendable job. I've been very impressed in the 2 meetings that I've come with in terms of what you guys are up against. But I do think if we're going to spend the money and allocate that, at least focus that on areas that need real attention right now. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Judy McLaughlin, and I teach at Westfield High School. I don't live in Westfield, so I'm not sure if I can make a public comment. But I did want to, I wasn't necessarily going to speak tonight, but I think there's a couple things that have come up that I would just like to share some comments about. And one of them is I understand how when someone says this position, it's vague. It is vague because, and I'm only speaking from my experience with the prior SRO, and that is that how, and the gentleman that just spoke said his daughter was not, I too would be glad if my students, if my 2 children were not involved with the police or necessarily were seeking them out, but there are students who do, and there are students who were seeking the prior SRO out because he was a male figure and he was a father figure. There are students who, when you describe the job, how do you describe somebody that is sort of like a student whisperer that's able to reach students? It may be, I know as a teacher, people might say, well, you stay after school. Well, you do more than that. You stay after school, you go to their games, you go on the bus with them, you talk to them when there's free time, you stop by the cafeteria, you might be in the hallway, you see them in various different areas. And you might go see them at their job in town. It depends, you do whatever it takes to reach that student. And so, absolutely, there are clearly students who would not approach that gentleman or that female, whoever it may pretend to be in the future, but who did not approach, who may not have approached Mr. Allen in the past, but those that did develop a sort of Dutch uncle relationship with him. And I think it was very beneficial to them. In terms of why didn't anything happen in the past, I think one of the comments that was just made was the counselors are very busy with the college process. And because they're busy, so many times the student will go down to the counseling office and not be able to reach their counselor at that time. Maybe they're at a junior conference, maybe they're at the middle school. And so sometimes there is a boundary set there. Yes, as teachers, I will be at graduation tomorrow night, and I will be a mess because my just about 100 students that are leaving are like my children. They're like my sons and daughters. So yes, the teachers are there, but there's something special about having someone who's casually in the building, who doesn't have to go to a class, who doesn't have to be in a meeting at that moment, and who's available, and who can talk about the game last night or talk about whatever it is that may be on the student's mind. And I also do Saturday detention, or have done that in the past, and many of those students who have racked up 50 hours, 40 hours, 70 hours of detention are oftentimes the students that might be sitting in Office A, the attendance office, where the SRO is located, or oftentimes came in during the day. So yes, $100,000 is a lot of money. I clearly, I hear you on that one. Yet when someone mentioned, you know, could we see some data? One of the things that I think of is, how do you quantify? It's not an officer that comes in with a gun, because that's not going to do it. But how do you quantify that person who suddenly developed relationships and was able to steer students who might have, in that anger that they have in as teenagers, and some of you that are parents may have come across that. I know I did when mine were teenagers. Sort of that time in high school when everything is raging, how do you have how do you develop that trust that when that student is really, you know, at this level, how do you develop the trust with them where when you walk over to them, you say, okay, you know, you just got to calm down, etc. That was the type of presence that this gentleman had. And I see, how do you quantify that? How do you quantify what didn't happen because he was there? And yes, you're right, nothing has happened over the last few years. I know we've been working very hard at trying to do whatever we could. We've gone through some changes, but I think, as was stated, there's a greater population, the numbers are getting higher, the population is changing. What students are seeing on television, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, I just think that, you know, I would love to see somebody like that back there. But in terms of the job description, it is all over the place because he was all over the place, and it really morphed. So you can't say, well, this person's going to be sitting in this office for these hours, because the nature of the job entailed that he was all over. So I just wanted to add that aspect for whatever it's worth. And good luck.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience on agenda items only? Comments on agenda items? All right. Seeing no one come to the podium.
What are you looking at me for?
This is an agenda item under finance. So, Mark, this is an agenda item under your section, finance. Consider whether you want to ask the board to discuss this topic at this time.
So what would it be proper to, since we've had all the public comments, to have board comments now, carve this out from the resolutions of finance, we can vote on it separately, and then come back to the rest of the agenda? Dana? Okay, so then I will, let's see what I need to do. So under finance resolution number 32, I would ask the board to consider the reinstatement of the SRO position in the district. Second?
Second.
Ginny? Ginny? Comments? Lucy, start from the end. Lucy?
Okay, there's just, after the last meeting with a lot of confusion on, like Mrs. McLaughlin had said, on what is the position and its vagueness, I just first wanted to state what NASRO, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers' mission statement is, which is to provide the highest quality of training to school-based law enforcement officers in order to promote safer schools and safer kids. NASRO is an organization for school-based law enforcement officers, school administrators, and school security safety professionals working as partners to protect students, faculty, and staff, and their school community. It began actually in 1953, and it wasn't until 1991 that it became a solid commitment to our nation's youth. It was founded on the triad concept school-based policing, which is the true and test of strength of school resource officer program. The triad concept divides SRO's responsibilities into 3 areas: facilitator, informal counselor, and law enforcement officer. By training law enforcement to educate, counsel, and protect our school communities, the men and women of Nazareth continue to lead by example and promote a positive image of law enforcement to our nation's youth. And I just wanted to mention a couple of other things about an SRO's responsibility. Just as it would be difficult to describe all the tangible and intangible ways an experienced caring teacher or administrator contributes to his or her school, it is also difficult to inventory all that an SRO can do for a campus and its surrounding community. Law enforcement's specialized knowledge of the law, local and national crime trends and safety threats, people and places in the community, and the local juvenile justice system combine to make them critical members of schools' policy-making teams when it comes to environmental safety planning and facilities management, school safety policy, and emergency response preparedness. Officers' law enforcement knowledge and skill combined with specialized SRO training for their duties in the educational setting. This training focuses on the special nature of school campuses, student needs and characteristics, and it focuses on the educational and custodial interests of school personnel. SROs, as a result, possess a skill set unique among both law enforcement and education personnel that enables SROs to protect the community and the school while supporting the educational mission. In addition to traditional law enforcement tasks, such as searching a student for, or not searching, but just to see if the student, is involved in anything or something that they shouldn't be, or whether there are, like I mentioned last time at the meeting, anything going on with cyberbullying or any activities that really shouldn't be going on. This is basically, their responsibility. I also just wanted to mention that the importance of an SRO being an active police officer is the fact of carrying the 2 radios, the one that's in the school system and the one that is connected to the police station. And I just, in response to Ms. Egbert with quoting my statement, that one comment I made about the unarmed security officer in my school was just one component that I was trying to mention, that yes, it can help in security. And the fact that in my school district, the unarmed officer wouldn't be able to help in a situation as such. However, the SRO at our high school was able to help with an active shooter on our school grounds. And I was just responding to one small component of an SRO and not the entire component, all the components of an SRO. And it was simply in response to Mr. Sullivan's time response that he had indicated for police officers getting onto a scene. And I think there was just one other thing. I've heard a lot about not about protecting one school. I know that I mentioned at the last meeting that the reason why it's not that the high school is a chosen school, it's that this is where our adolescents are. And it's about helping these children at the most crucial times of their lives. And it's exactly what Mrs. McLaughlin had just said, that sometimes they're the ones there at the right time and at the right place when counselors and teachers may or may not be. And just the last comment I'd like to make is about the fact that Chief Wayman had said that he picked out or knew who he had in mind beforehand with the police officer. It's not the fact that he was trying to keep that a secret, that's why he did say that publicly, is because it clearly indicates, if you were to read about an SRO position, that a school police officer needs to be a special person. Not every single person that is a police officer can be an SRO. And when this position was brought to his attention, he did think about his staff. And it wasn't that this position was created for him. He did think about, what police officer do I have that can make these connections with students? What police officer do I have that would care about students, that would be willing to connect with students? It's not an easy thing to do, to connect with students. And I think that that is the reason why he outwardly said that he had somebody in mind. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Anybody else? Mitch?
Yes, thanks. So there are those who believe I'm opposing the SRO because of my personal political view on guns. Well, I don't deny that my initial concern was about placing an armed officer when I first heard about this. The decision, like every decision I make, is not based on my political views, but what I believe is best for our schools and what I believe is best for our students. With that in mind, I believe what we really need in the high school is to bring back the school assistance counselor, not a school resource officer. I've been told that we're reinstating the SRO not in response to Newtown and other tragedies, but to help troubled students in the high school. But our counselors tell me that what they really need is a school assistance counselor. Our counselors say they don't need a police officer. They say they need a skilled professional designated to deal with a handful of troubled kids who consume a disproportionate amount of their time. With an SRO in place, our guidance counselors would have more time to work with students on course selection, college readiness, emotional support, and all of the other tasks that they are currently getting short shrift. What's more, the school assistance counselor would be a licensed professional counselor. He or she would have the years of training required to make sure our students get the help that they need. I do not believe a police officer with a few days, a few weeks, even a few months of training can accomplish the same goal. Interestingly, most of the schools in the surrounding districts that we've looked into have a school assistance counselor on staff. Most do not have a school resource officer. Some do, but not most. I also want to reiterate my concern that there's been a rush to reinstate this position. As someone mentioned earlier, I do not fully understand what we're doing. I know it was briefly mentioned at a board meeting earlier this year in a different context, but the fact remains that most board members were unaware that the position was coming up for a vote and unprepared to make a decision without further discussion and research. So my recommendation tonight would be to table this vote until we have properly researched and discussed what our students really need. I'd like to propose a motion to table finance number 32. Do I have a second?
There's a motion on the floor.
What's the process? Tell me. What do I do?
The motion would have to be removed, would have to be voted
No,
down.
we can hear this motion. If there's a second, we can vote on it, and then we can go back to the typical motion. Why you'd make a motion and not let board members speak is beyond me, but you've made your motion.
It's been done before, sir. Thank you.
I didn't comment on that.
Okay, just saying, it's been done
Did you second
before.
the motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Dana, roll call.
Wait, we don't have an opportunity to,
Oh, please.
wait,
It's Mitch's motion.
I need
Go.
some clarification.
I'm making a
Your
motion to
motion was
table
that
this.
we table this.
That we table this for further
Okay.
discussion.
Then I don't have any questions, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, so now we're taking a roll call to table.
This is a vote as to whether we table this whole discussion on the SRO.
Right now.
Right now.
Rich Matessa,
No.
Lucy Biegler,
No.
Ann Carey. Yes. Mark Friedman,
No.
Brendan Gallagher,
No.
Roseanne Kirsted,
No.
Ginny Lights,
No.
Gretchen Oleg,
No.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
The noes carry. We are now back to Mark Freeman's motion regarding the SRO.
Okay, then the last thing I would say is that there's a lot at stake here. That's why if we do vote, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Is it appropriate for you asking
Sure. Can I just ask, and I'm not trying to be snarky, I'm trying to get clarification. So we know that we don't have the resources to hire a student assistance counselor, that would be $58,000 in salary plus $20,000 in benefits, and that's assuming that the individual that we hire has no advanced degrees. So that's not an option.
Yes, it is.
At this time.
Why is that not an option?
Well, because then other things would have to be cut from the budget.
Let's talk about it.
Oh, okay.
I
So
think
that
it's an
being set
option.
aside, you made a statement that the counselors have communicated to you that that's what we need, that they don't want an SRO, that they want a SAC.
Mm-hmm.
Who are these counselors? How did you talk to them? How did you gather information
I've done my
from
research.
them?
We'll leave it at that. I've done my research.
Well, Mitch, that's not fair to us.
Well, I'm sorry. I've done my research. It's in fairness to the counselors that I spoke to
I've done my research.
Okay, so the director of guidance told us something different at the meeting.
Okay.
Not
2 weeks
only
ago.
at the last meeting, at the meeting on March 3rd where she came in and did a guidance presentation. So you can cite unnamed guidance counselors, Mitch, but I think you have some responsibility to at least go through the administration if you're going to go talking to guidance counselors and give Maureen Mazaries the respect of knowing that you're doing that and coordinate comments so that this doesn't happen.
Well, I would have liked the respect of having a little more time on this decision.
I guess that's my other question is, in terms of this rush to reinstatement, which is something that I keep hearing, I certainly keep reading about, I think when Dr. Dolan made her presentation, it's indisputable that it came up at our March meeting, that it was on the slideshow, the PowerPoint, that the SRO position was part of the budget. So we certainly had an opportunity from that time on to comment. My assumption is, and I guess what I want some clarification on, is that issue must also have come up to the Finance Committee prior to the budget being brought to the full board.
I think the first time it was mentioned in finance was in December.
Are you a member of the Finance Committee?
Yes, I am, and I asked the question if the officer would be armed.
Okay, and did you also inquire as to whether there were other uses of that $50,000 at that point?
Am I on trial?
I'm just
Mitch,
trying to
she's
gain
asking
some
questions about the
clarification,
point.
Mitch.
I'm telling you, I would have liked a little more time to make this decision. Take it for what it is. Yes, I am on finance. I asked the question. At that point, the answer, I believe, was, I don't know. Is that correct?
It could have been, that was one of
Ann,
many.
you were in that meeting?
Yes, that was,
Okay,
that
was
is
the
the answer
answer.
that I recall.
Okay. So
And
I
that-
basically
so that
felt
was
like
the
it wasn't
extent
going to
of
be
the
done.
Discussion at the Finance Committee meeting. Mr. Finance Chair, is that correct?
What was your question?
The extent of the discussion at the December Finance Committee is it going to be armed? I don't know.
Correct. We didn't get into any discussion about the value of the position or not. And frankly, you know, I mean, I'll sit here and say, and I have 2 prepared remarks, I wish we had asked more questions earlier in the process, for sure.
Shame on us, but I think that the implication that's being made to the public that we're rushing to something is not a fair one.
Okay.
I agree. It's our responsibility as board members, this idea of having a, oh, I know.
Sorry.
It's not, hello? I agree. The responsibilities of board members and the purpose of committees is to vet what the administration brings forward to us. And while I wasn't in the December finance meetings, I was in some of the other finance meetings, and we did talk about this is a priority for you. Why is this a priority? That was discussed. And for board members who asked questions and didn't get the answers that they wanted or didn't get the answers, it's our responsibility to require that information from the administration and if you didn't, then you didn't. But it's not that this has been rushed. We as a board have known about this since December.
So a lot of information has come out at the last meeting and at this meeting. And rarely does the board have an audience. Usually we sit here and we are alone, talking to each other. Maybe we have one person who might come out, but rarely do we have an audience. And I feel the last 2 meetings, a lot of parental concern has been shown, a lot of staff people have come. There are a lot of different decisions to make here. And I think that what would be in the best interest of the community would be to create a citizens advisory committee, and we could have a lot of people here tonight. A lot of people are experts. They could sit on the committee and we could fully vet this, because I don't feel that even the board has a full understanding of exactly how this person is going to operate in the school.
So Ann, we've had a vote on tabling this. It didn't pass. To your comment as to the fact that there are people here, I know that you emailed people to come using listservs. You wrote an article in the paper asking people to come. How often do you do that?
Rich, I didn't email anyone.
You didn't email anyone?
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay,
And
so-
I'd like you to produce an email because they don't
You wanna
exist.
do that? Okay. So we won't do that, but there were complaints that you were emailing people, asking them to come to this meeting. I don't care if you do that.
There were
I
complaints?
don't care if you do that. But I don't like that you sit here and say, gee, we have an audience, when board members wrote articles in the paper that were somewhat controversial, when board members posted on Facebook, come out to the meeting.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? This is transparency.
Okay, Mitch,
Come on now.
Mitch, we can go one at a time. Hang on. I'm happy to have people here. I'm going to your comment that we have an audience tonight. We don't go through all our agendas and say, hey, here's what's on the agenda tonight. Come out. So don't be surprised that this audience is bigger than a typical audience where that's not done. That's my only point.
I think it's due to the subject. Because
Okay.
I would love for you to show me an email that I wrote.
Okay, well,
Rich,
if you didn't, you didn't. I'll accept that.
just to comment on piggybacking off what you said about the emails. I don't know why this isn't working. I think in the past about week or so, but mostly the past 3 days, I could confidently say for every email we received, maybe that someone may be against the SRO, we've been receiving residents' emails saying they want the position reinstated and they're in support of the SRO.
Actually, that's not
So-
accurate. That's just not
Mitch,
accurate.
Mitch, let people talk. You can have your turn.
Okay, so the point is that since the 2 weeks it's been tabled, there are plenty of people in support of it. And the other thing I did want to say on behalf of Maureen Mazarese, as a school teacher, personally, I find it offensive, I guess, if there are people under her that are counselors that are speaking derogatorily behind her back and disagreeing with something that she has publicly made a statement on, that the counselors are, this is something that the counselors need. I can't imagine that the counselors would be doing that. I certainly know that that wouldn't be going on in my school. So I just want to comment on that. And if it is, I'm very appalled.
Other questions? Ginny?
Thank you. I wasn't able to be in attendance at the meeting on June 11th, when it was noted in public that many parents were concerned, the public was concerned that they were caught by surprise that the board had this item on the agenda, and they felt that they didn't have much information. Had I been able to attend that board meeting, you would have heard me report that on Thursday, May 23rd, as board liaison, I attended McKinley School PTO meeting, as well as the Parent-Teacher Council general membership meeting on that day. And in both meetings, I told the attendees that Dr. Dolan was recommending to the board that we reinstate the student resource officer position. I initiated the conversation on this topic, and in both meetings, many questions were asked, answered, discussed. The result was an informed group of parents who knew that this was an upcoming topic for board conversation. Although not in attendance of the meeting, I watched the full meeting through our video capability, and I am informed about the opinions voiced and the questions raised by fellow board members and the public. And during this past week, our superintendent and business administrator have dedicated great effort to answering questions from board members and addressing concerns. I appreciate the public's taking the time to come out and talk to us about your individual opinions. And as many of you as there are, of course there are that many opinions on the subject. In the final analysis, I should say, first of all, my children lived through having a student resource officer here at the high school. Although my son and daughter had no interaction specifically with this individual. My son, who is a man of very few words, told me that, yeah, it's a great position, needs to be here, it works for those who need it. I remember a number of years ago when the board was wrestling with the cost of providing guidance counselors at the elementary schools. The concept was quite new and not well understood by many in the public and quite a few members of the board. I remember people saying, why would I want to have a guidance counselor or a counselor sitting in the schools? My kids don't need it. Why is this a good use of money. And yet I would bet any money now that you all know, and we all know, a neighbor, a friend, within our own family children, who have needed that resource at a critical time in their lives. Maybe not everybody in every family. But again, this is a position and a resource position that contributes to the entire well-being of the community. We're starting and focusing on the high school. Maybe it would be a good idea to have a student resource officer in other levels of our school system. But right now, we have experience at the high school. We know the value of putting that resource in the high school, and so that is our starting point. So in the final analysis, I'm satisfied that reinstating the position is the right thing to do. I do support that reinstatement on a full-time basis. I recognize the benefits of the program. I believe it's in the best interest of our Board of Education in the town of Westfield to reestablish the program. I believe the partnership with the police department would make a very positive contribution to our schools. This is not a security issue. This is not providing safety from unintended, unusual, emergent situations. But certainly there is a security and a safety component that can be supported by the police officer who is a resource officer. But my sense is that this is really about relationship building. It's an intangible, but it's a reality. Kids need somebody to talk to, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a counselor, whether it's an administrator, a coach. Maybe it's a student resource officer. In the end, they need the opportunity to look an adult straight in the eyes. They need to have a conversation. They need to be able to express themselves. And they need to have a mentor to grow through, to develop their own self-interest, to find out who they are and succeed in life. I believe this is the right thing to do for our community and for our school community.
Other questions? Comments? Roseanne?
Brendan
Keep
can
going
go.
around the table?
Brendan
No?
can go.
Okay, Brendan.
At the end of board comments, I'll go to public comments.
I'm just echoing many comments that were made by Judy McLaughlin. The school resource officer isn't for the student that's getting straight A's. It isn't for the student that has their next 25 years already planned out. It's for the project kid. It's for the kid in the bridge program that's falling between the cracks, may have been picked up, may not yet. The school resource officer is there, Detective Allen was there, for my friends. He was there on the football field, making relationships with the kids that are at sports practice every day. He was a PAL coach for me for years. I didn't need him in that capacity, but I know people that did, and it worked out very well for them. He identified 9th graders that were sort of marginal and directed them into the Police Explorers summer camp. It's a 2-week camp that interacts 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th graders with police officers. The one friend that went through that is now a sergeant in the Army, translating Korean, sitting in a DMZ right now. Very good friend of mine. Ron Allen made that happen. Last week I explained my own personal interaction with him, where I was the victim of a crime. And not only did he figure out who was responsible, because word travels, but he checked up on me. He made sure that things were going okay, and that they weren't coming back and bothering me. And then my last comment is on the flow of emails in the last week, 2 weeks. They started out very negative, and it was very discouraging. And then in the last 3 days, seeing the flow of mixed emails, positive emails, sometimes 4 in a row, it was very encouraging. And I wrestled a lot with my decision. But seeing the support, it's easy to write an angry letter. It's a lot harder to take time out of your day to put together a positive letter and support something. And that's making it one of the easiest decisions I've had to make. I support the SRO.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Gretchen?
I guess
Can I speak for another?
Sure, Roseanne?
I wrote a statement. I don't usually write statements because I like to speak off the cuff, but there were a lot of disparate ideas and feelings going through my head, so I felt it was important for me to write them down, to organize them and make sense for myself, and hopefully so I can make sense when I talk. Many of this that I've written has been said already in some form or another, but I guess I'll stick with what I wrote, with some editorializing, I guess. As has been stated throughout the night, the SRO position is multifaceted, and I think that is possibly one reason why, at least after last week's meeting, some people left a little confused, because it's not one thing, it's many things, and it can have to do with security, it can have to do with being an advisor or a mentor, and it can have to do with being an educator. And I must have heard differently, and I know I've spoken to Dr. Dolan about this, and I did not hear her say that it was not a position for security. I heard her say that that's not the primary responsibility, and that's not the only reason to have this position. And like many people have said, while it's not specifically for security, if something were to occur in the building, it's nice to have somebody in the building. And seconds do count in some of these horrific incidences that have occurred in the past. And while, yes, it's not probable, it is possible. So that's the security piece. That's the potential security piece. And while it's not the primary one, it is one. And another comment was, well, then why not put it in the other schools? And my feeling about that is, I guess it would be nice. But again, the position is multifaceted. And the other aspects of the SRO position, it's at the high school where they are most needed. Not to say that it might not be needed in the middle school or even the elementary schools, but right now, our high school has the greatest need for those other responsibilities. In addition, we are addressing the security at other schools in a variety of ways that some people have mentioned. There could be cameras, there could be vestibules, there could be more people walking around. I love the idea of officers stopping by, walking in. I'm sure that's something we can talk to the town about and the police officers, but that's regardless of the SRO position. And if we even had that for the high school, that wouldn't address the other issues, the other responsibilities that the SRO would have. Now, what I've read about and what I've heard when I've spoken to people who have had interactions with the SRO, it just seems to be invaluable to me to have teenagers have the opportunity to interact with law enforcement when they are not in trouble. I think that connection is immeasurable. I think that connection, whether a child requires the SRO's attention or advice or not in the high school years, is invaluable. If the student specifically seeks out the SRO for advice, well, great. That is a wonderful benefit that I would be thrilled to be able to offer a student if that is the person whom he or she feels a connection to ask advice. I think it would be invaluable for the students to see the law enforcement officer all the time, so it's more casual. To say the law enforcement officer to say, how's it going, what's up? Because if students will actually, when students are in the outside world, if they're in a situation and they're not sure what to do, I want them to feel comfortable going to law enforcement. And I don't want them to think that law enforcement is unapproachable. And if they feel comfortable going to law enforcement because they've had a relationship with an SRO, or even if they've just seen the SRO in the building all the time. That, to me, is also invaluable. People have also stated that there are lots of demands on our budget and question whether this is the best use of $50,000, and that $50,000 is too much. That's the allocation for the Board of Ed. But that's how much it costs for an acting police officer. And to hire someone who is not an acting police officer in Westfield might cover the security piece, but will not address the other objectives. For example, one of the many opportunities of having an SRO is that as an active police officer, he will have knowledge of what happens in people's homes that the school knows nothing about because we are not allowed to know unless the family tells us. So since the officer knows, he can keep a special watch out for that child or that children if something in their home is happening, like abuse, like a custody battle, like abandonment. I don't know. The school district does not know these things, but the police do. And if the police know about a child or a family who's struggling and can keep an extra eye out for that child who's quite not centered at the moment, I think that's really important. And I think that's such a benefit that we could provide for that student and that family. So people can say we need another counselor, but a counselor can't do that because a counselor won't know. And people can say we need a counselor, but the counselor can't have the interaction with high school students that garners a connection so students feel comfortable to go up to a police officer outside of school because they've already had a relationship with one in the high school. And you can say we need another counselor, but having two counselors go to visit a truant student's family home does not produce the same effect as when a counselor, the school principal, and the SRO go together. Actually, the school doesn't even go to homes anymore because the SRO is no longer there. And yes, not every police officer will make a good SRO, but that is why the superintendent will work closely with the police chief to ensure that we have the right person. And we did talk a little bit about the process and transparency, but I do want to talk a little bit more about that. I find it interesting that many people in the various media outlets, what they've written in their opinion pieces, and I'm hoping that people realize that what's mostly in those media outlets is opinion, and that's including some board members who wrote that the board has not followed its own process and has not been transparent. I found that difficult to get my head around because the board did follow the process. It's each board member's responsibility to bring up issues of concern at the time of discussion. This was discussed in December through March in the Finance Committee meetings and in March in public during our public budget meetings. There were even headlines about the positions in the media outlets. If anything broke down in the process, it was individuals not speaking up and not asking for clarification and not doing I feel like I did my due process, their due process. So instead of blaming the board for not doing the process, I think some people might need to look a little closer to home. It's been said the decision should not be rushed, but we're not rushing it. It's been discussed. The administration has been talking about this for more than since December. Previous board members have written emails saying, ever since it's been, we've taken away the position, I've brought it up every year. So I don't feel it's rushed. As for transparency, I find it's interesting that in some people's opinion, the board has not been transparent. In my opinion, some other people have not been transparent. People I've had conversations with have told me it's not the position, it's not the process, and no matter what answers I get, it won't matter because it's the gun, and I don't want the gun in the school. And if that's someone's position, I can appreciate that. But don't hide behind all of the other stuff, the process, the transparency, it's too rushed. If you have an issue with the gun, go out and say you have an issue with the gun. Because I understand that that is a very sensitive topic. It evokes many strong feelings and opinions, some conflicting, at least for myself. But the SRO position is not an armed guard, meaning he's not stationed at the front door checking everybody in. That's what an armed guard is, stationed at the front checking everybody in. He's not an armed guard. And I appreciate the concerns some may have for not having a gun in the school, but I do not appreciate some of the things that have been said, like associating the board with the NRA or being accused of rushing a decision, like I said. It's just not accurate, and I don't think it's helpful for the discussion. So I hope I've addressed the many concerns that I've heard. And I am in support of the reinstatement of this multifaceted position.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Comments? Gretchen?
I just have one brief comment. Like Roseanne, I tried to sit down and write something, and I kept coming back to it over the weekend because I walked in here tonight undecided. And I thought that maybe by writing it out, I would get to an end point, which would then tell me my decision, but I kept getting distracted by all of the stuff that I think you referred to. Is our guidance department strong enough? Despite the fact that Dr. Dolan and the principal of our high school and staff are telling us that this is the priority, is it really with the best use of our funds? All the stuff. I appreciate the effort that was made by the administration this week to answer all of our questions. I appreciate that there has been some language added to the contract that we would have with the police department that not only clarifies that this is a one-year agreement, but also that we have the right to give 30 days notice if we don't feel like the position is working out. I think that those are some of the questions that we heard from the public tonight in terms of what our degree of control will be over this individual. And sitting here now and hearing all the testimony tonight and listening, I too am in full support of reinstating what I think is indisputably a really valuable resource to support our students and our staff, and will be a huge asset to the district. So thank you everybody for your time and all of you for coming out tonight.
Anybody else? Rich? Sure. You want me to go first?
Only if you want to.
Sure. So I don't have, being the 7th or 6th, there's not much left to say. I did walk in tonight essentially with two prepared thoughts, one for and one against the position, because I, like Gretchen, really was not sure how I wanted to vote. But I've listened a lot to last week and to this week, and have been able to formulate an opinion. Firstly, I wish, as chairman of the Finance Committee, that I had questioned the possible reinstatement of the SRO back when it first came up, more so than we did. The fact remains that we do our very best to vet as many of the decisions that are being proposed as we possibly can. I think most on the board will know that I ask an awful lot of questions. I sometimes wonder how I can top myself, but I do ask a lot of questions, and this is one that I just didn't ask, and that may not be good for the board, because that might mean that I'll ask a lot more questions in the future. I do wish that we had gone through a more thorough review of the position before it initially came up for a vote. But for whatever the reasons, the last 2 weeks have allowed the public, both for and against, have allowed me to learn a lot about the position. And frankly, I don't believe, because I think there have been a lot of good points made, I don't believe that moving forward with an SRO precludes us from looking at a student assistant counselor at some point in the future, because I do support that concept. I do have reservations about the fact that the Westfield Police Department will have sole authority and control of this position within our building. It is true, however, that has been said, that we can remove the officer at our discretion, and the Westfield Police Department will work closely with Dr. Dolan and the administration at the high school. As Gretchen mentioned, the potential agreement, which we've not signed yet and has not been completely agreed upon, as far as I'm concerned, is in fact a one-year deal. And in my mind, although it reinstates a program that we've had 10 years of very good success with, to me it's a pilot program. It's the opportunity to bring something back that was held in high esteem previously. And frankly, whether this role is about safety or not, or about counseling or not, we are being proactive here. And I would feel awful whether it was about security or whether it was just about counseling, if we had an opportunity to do something and we were not proactive. So after all that being said, I believe that our role on the board is to take public input into consideration, which I believe we have, to support our administration when we can, and to use the information that we have to make the very best decision possible. So for the reasons above, I'll be voting yes to reinstate the SRO on the one-year agreement with the county. Rich?
Sure, my thoughts are somewhat repetitive of what's been said. I was actually going to pass, but
okay,
since I'll go through them. I just have a few comments on the process and the substance of the SRO position. Regarding the process, as you've heard, this board has known for months that we were contemplating the hiring of an SRO. The public knew 3 months ago. You can just look at the headlines advising that we were in fact discussing hiring a Westfield police officer to be stationed at the high school. And this board in March then unanimously approved the budget for that position. We haven't violated or avoided one procedure, policy, regulation, rule, or law with respect to how the SRO position has been moved forward. For anyone to intentionally or unintentionally mislead the public into thinking otherwise is just wrong. In fact, I would go further and say it's harmful not just to the board, but to the students who would in fact benefit from the SRO position. And that brings me to my opinion on the substance of the SRO position. Because the process debate is in fact a lot of noise. What matters is whether this position will be meaningful to the student population. I doubt it will benefit my own kids, but that's not the threshold by which I make decisions as a board member. I put great weight in Maureen Mazzary's description at our last board meeting of how this position can help, and in the past, in fact, has helped, a subset of our student base. As Maureen described it, some kids need a multi-pronged approach. A little bit of guidance, which her team provides. A little bit of administration, which Peter's team provides. And a little bit of what an SRO has to offer, separate and apart from the other two prongs of the equation. We have the opportunity, even with our limited budget, to help these students. I'm not qualified to say they don't need that help. And I'm certainly not going to say they don't deserve it or they're not worth it. And I'm not going to sit here and micromanage Maureen, Peter, and Dr. Dolan. If we can't trust them to allocate $50,000 to an identified need, then we have bigger issues that we should be discussing as a board. I don't believe the micromanaging is because we truly don't believe Maureen, Peter, and Dr. Dolan can't determine what is in our students' best interest. I think this became a bigger debate because some people are opposed to firearms, even when worn by a police officer in the school. And we heard some of that tonight from public. I could respect that point of view, even though I don't agree with it, if that is simply what was said. And as I mentioned, speakers got up tonight and said that very clearly. But to make this whole discussion about some lack of process, or somehow the board knowing better than the people we've put in charge, is simply shameful and would be doing a complete disservice to the students we work so hard to make better, meeting after meeting. Thank you.
Any more questions? If there are no more questions, I'll ask Dana to take a roll call vote.
We did say we'd go to the
Okay.
public, Mark. We typically
Okay.
wait till the end of the meeting, but this was a large topic that people wanted to speak on. Same routine, please just go to the microphone. It's not a race to the mic. You can speak tonight as long as you need to. Please start with your name and address.
My name is Charles Sullivan. I live at 820 Crank Avenue, Westfield. And to say hello to my wife, excuse her, but I promised I wouldn't speak because I thought that all the information we put out there would help you make your decision. And you've made your decision. We could agree to disagree. I respect your opinion. This is a board. Take a vote. Fine. But I do have some questions. The gentleman over here, PhD person from John Jay. Again, people know I have bachelor's in Merck.
Charlie, if you could speak into the microphone,
I'm sorry.
please. Thank you.
Some people said different things about campus security, and this gentleman here, I never met him before. He lives in town. It's great. Wow, he's a John Jay alum, just like me. I wish I would have met him some other time. Okay. I believe the SORO program, but I think I wrote articles. I wrote a lot of articles because I was using different school systems as a model about firearms because I'm a retired police officer and I can carry a gun, but nobody's ever seen me one because I don't carry a firearm because that's something I don't wish to do. I'm not a gun guy. But if you go over the bridge into New York City, the New York City public school system, you have schools in Brownsville, East New York, some very tough areas where the public safety officers inside schools do not carry firearms. You have metal detectors, you have wrought iron fences, and you have wire in the windows. They don't put guns in schools. Okay, having said that. Same thing I mentioned about Princeton University. Princeton is very much like Westfield Town, demographically, population-wise, and they have the Princeton Public Safety and Princeton Police Department have understanding about shared resources, as what you guys talk about now, shared resources, trying to address the problem in a proactive way. But again, public safety officers at Princeton University don't carry firearms because they deal with student issues, student culture issues, lost property, arguments, those types of things. And but when they have a problem, they call the police department. And I've heard a lot of things about Detective Allen. The gentleman at the end, I coached PAO football, and he didn't coach PAO football. He was a police officer assigned to PAO football program. I coached there for 3 years, and around your age. So
he was on the field.
Okay.
Yes. No. I'm just saying that he was a great guy. A great guy. I mean, he was amazing. He wore a lot of hats. He was everywhere. That's true. But you're asking this new person to put magic back in a bottle. He was like, we're going to get this guy, and he's going to do all these things for us. Okay. We have a list of things, all these things that we want him to do. But are you going to get that guy? But more importantly, where is your input to pick the guy? Now, Chief has said, we had this person picked out, he's got 8 years of service. Just like this gentleman from New York that I've never met before. There are people out there who are more qualified to be an SRO in this town than I would think a police officer in town. And the reason why you mention that is because there are cops out there within the state that would love the opportunity to come apply for your position in school. Why not post it out there and have somebody say, okay, well, what do we want him to do? You know, we want him to have contact, you want him to be like a coach. Okay, you know, we want a guy that like coached Little League football or baseball because he likes to deal with the kids. That's great. And we want somebody who can deal with family issues because that's important too. Oh, and we want somebody that's going to deal with educational issues because that's important. And then we want another person about drugs and alcohol and driver training and a lot of different things. But also security. Now, you know, I know about your security in your school because I did the assessment. What I'm trying to say is that I think that, I mean, you guys made a decision, you're going to vote, but if you took the time, really took the time to post this job out of the Westfield bubble where there's no crime in this town and social issues. There's social issues in this town, yes, but very little crime. Maybe you get a better candidate. I'm just amazed that you guys never thought about that. And an SRO is a resource officer. I didn't hear one conversation about what that resource is going to be for the teachers in this school. According to the United States Secret Service, they did the survey of 47 shootings. First responders are teachers. Okay? So if you decide that you're going to hire this person in the language of your contract, I would hope that you would put some type of language in the contract where you're going to train teachers to be first responders, because they are. They are. So these are some of the things I just wanted to make sure that were discussed. The city school systems, across the bridge, they don't carry firearms, and I think that if you were to post this job out to people, you would get better candidates. Or you'd get more candidates. You have this one guy, have you ever met him before? Do you know who he is? Okay, if you are getting in the job, you people ran for office to be on this board, you ran against somebody. So a person, we would have a choice, either this candidate or this candidate. What's the pros and cons? If you're going to go with this SRO, okay, great. But why don't you take the time to get the best candidate? Maybe the person from Westfield Town is the best candidate. But if you had 3 or 4 people applying for the job, you could speak to them. I know this. You want to do it for 1 year, and we could change. Let's be honest. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Once they're in, and you can pay for him, he's going to be here. Period. So, but again, there might be people out there who have more education, training. That might be a good candidate. So that's it. I'm sorry. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
I promised I'd come back. Rich, my name is Jonathan Blitt, still at 236 Grove. Rich, just so you don't feel compelled to interrupt me, I'm telling you at the beginning of this that this is my opinion. So there is sort of no discussion. This whole thing, see, I think that the problem here isn't that people are opposed to guns like you guys think. In fact, the 2 board members really didn't go into great detail as to their opposition to guns. It was merely that they didn't have enough information. The first thing I want to say is I know that everybody here appreciates all the time you guys dedicate to this. We know you spend an inordinate amount of time outside of your families, not seeing your kids, coming home from work, and dedicating your time here. So that's aside. But this whole event, just like the roofing event, seems like a control of information. Do you know everything from Dr. Dolan's synopsis of last week's event, which was so one-sided and biased that every single parent I talked to at Tamaulipas Elementary School asked me when she was going to redact it, when she was going to put out a synopsis, which is supposed to be a summary of events, that was accurate, that reflected both sides of that 2-hour and 33-minute discussion. See, the problem isn't that people are opposed to it or for it. It's a great position. I think people will agree. Opposed to guns or not opposed, it's a great position. You're going to approve it for all the right reasons, probably. But the problem is you didn't tell people. You didn't talk to them. And the information that you did send out had mixed messages. Last board meeting, you couldn't even adequately tell us what the objectives were. In fact, you couldn't tell us if the position was going to be armed or not. You said it couldn't be a retired police officer. You said they had to be armed, but in actuality, we found out that that's not always the case. That in fact, some SROs are retired police officers, and that some SROs aren't armed. Actually, I think that a quick Google search will beg to differ. The last thing that I just wanted to say, sorry for interrupting you, is just that from the moment that you guys took this issue up, and it is a good issue, and you're going to approve it, and I'm sorry it's such a hostile, divisive thing. It's very, very important to all of us for various reasons, right? From the moment you took it up, it just should have been public. It should have been very public. And yes, you discussed it in the finance meeting, but you didn't go overboard letting people know. And I can tell you that, Ginny, it's fantastic that you did discuss it with your board. I know that my wife is very active in the Tacos PTO, and it wasn't really discussed through the Tacos PTO, or at least the importance of it wasn't emphasized. And that's not your fault. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, whoever the liaison is. The point just is it's a very contentious issue, and had you guys made it more of an issue, you'd have fewer people here angry. At a bare minimum, we just want to know if you've really vetted this information, as you said that you did, then you clearly looked into alternatives. And I'm sure a lot of people, at least people who have talked to me, would love to know how you ruled out a lot of those alternatives and what they were.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Kim Schumacher. I live at 885 North Avenue West. I actually have no desire to share my thoughts on the SRO officer with all of you this evening, but I would like to comment on something that was said a little bit earlier. Before I do that, though, I would like to thank the 9 of you very much for all that you do for the students and the staff here in Westfield. I'm a graduate of the high school, and I'm proud that my boys go to school here, as it's a wonderful district. And I appreciate the amount of time that you give up on a Monday night at 10:40, still sitting here and not home watching some reality television. So I appreciate that immensely. But the one thing that I want to say is a little bit of a concern. The 9 of you have an immense amount of power, even though you're only volunteers. And you may not realize the amount of power that comes with this position, but there's a great amount of power. And although as a parent of a child in this school, and I know many of you are, you could at any point in time pick up the phone and contact your child's teacher or send them an email if you have questions about how they're doing socially, how they're doing academically, or how they're doing emotionally. But it has always been my understanding that if any board member wanted to speak to any staff member in this district to discuss board information or board concerns, it has been my understanding that they always needed to go through the board president. So I just want to remind all of you of the oath and the pledge that you took when you took on this position, okay? Because as the representative of the over 500 and some staff members in this town, it is my job to make sure that things are being done above board. And I asked Dr. Dolan, Mr. Matesic, and Ms. Kerstead if you please remind the board members of that in your next private session. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Anyone else on the board? Hearing no more comments or questions, Dana?
Rich Matesic.
Yes.
Lucy Bigler.
Yes.
Ann Carey.
No.
Mark Friedman.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Roseanne Kerstead.
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Oldley.
Yes.
Ange Slater.
No.
All right. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Page 1, item 4.
She won't take offense, but I'll figure it out.
there'll be a PowerPoint in a moment or two. So tonight's superintendent's report has to do with the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, the required school assessments. Actually, those who, either the board members who are always at the board table viewing the presentations, or those who regularly watch them, know that we've already had 2 presentations this year reviewing the numbers of bullying incidents and the number of investigations and the number of actual incidents, and that complies with the law. But this year, right after we did, sometimes timing is everything, right after we did our second report of the year, the state came up with a new system that will result in every school, every public school in New Jersey and every public school district in New Jersey receiving a grade for how they're doing regarding the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. So since this came out after the second report of the year, it is required that I review this in the public, and will do so now. And this, it turns out to be that the state is requiring every school to have their school safety team review a number of criteria and self-evaluate how they're doing on each of these areas on anti-bullying. And this was done in each of our schools in the district. This is the first step in the reporting process. It is required that it's reported in a public meeting. It is required that the board approve the submission of these reports, these self-assessments rather, to the county superintendent and the state. And then then the state will come up with a system of determining grades for all the public school districts and public schools in the state. So, it's a lovely sound really for that in that phone. So there are actually 8 major categories for this report, and they deal with both programs that we offer to the students, the training, specific training that's required in the law, curriculum for instructing the children in harassment, intimidation, and bullying, personnel requirements, the process, the actual process for reporting HIB incidents. HIB is known as harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And the reporting that's required by the state after the reports are completed. Underneath these 8 areas, there are a total of 25 different descriptors, and each school safety team had to review and determine how they did on each one of these 25 descriptors. If they did not meet the state requirements, they were to give themselves a 0. If they partially met the requirement, they received a grade of 1. If they met the requirements, it was 2, and if they exceeded it, it was 3. Now, with 25 different descriptors and 10 different schools, we were trying to determine how to limit the number of pages and charts and how to make it visible for everyone. So we've summarized for each of the descriptors how each school did. So the first area, again, has to do with programs. It talks about did we establish harassment, intimidation, and bullying programs? These would have to do with things like the assemblies we bring, the meetings we have for parents, etc. Do we implement them? Do we determine how successful they are? Are we creating a school-wide condition to prevent the HIB? And is the school safety team in each school identifying patterns of HIB in their school? So on all of those, you can see that our school safety teams in each school determined that they at least met the requirements or exceeded them. The next area talks about the training. All school employees are required to be trained in the requirements of the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights and the district policy on HIB. One aspect of the HIB law in New Jersey has to do with the fact that harassment, intimidation, bullying are based on protected categories. So making sure that all of our staff understand that. And do our students understand it? Clearly, our students at the younger grades have a different understanding than those at middle school or the high school, but they all need to have an understanding appropriate for their ages. And again, you can see that our each of our schools rated themselves as either exceeding or meeting the requirements. The next area talks about specific training required. That requires training in suicide prevention and also on harassment, intimidation, bullying prevention. Were our anti-bullying specialists given some time during their schedule to receive specific training? The members of the school safety team, did they receive some instruction? And also our school leaders, very important that they certainly have a good understanding of the requirements and the law. Next area is the curriculum. Are we providing instruction, direct instruction to students in different ways? Do we observe the required week of respect, which is required of all public schools in New Jersey during October? The core element number 5 deals with the required harassment, intimidation, bullying personnel. Has the principal appointed a school anti-bullying specialist? Have the anti-bullying specialists met at least 2 times a year? And have the school safety teams meet at least 2 times a year? The next, again, we still have exceeding and meeting requirements. Core element 6 has to do with the actual HIB incident reporting procedures. They are very specific. Every single one of them has a different timeline and different paperwork required. The board knows well that we have been following that because they get reports on how that is progressing. Core element 7 continues to do with the HIB investigation procedures. We're required to notify the parents of all alleged offenders and all alleged victims. We're then required to complete the investigation within 10 days and prepare a written report. And then the results of the investigations come to me. And the final element has to do with making sure that we have a procedure that all staff member reports include the required information from the state. So our schools are working very hard on this. Certainly, long before there was an anti-bullying Bill of Rights, our teachers, our administrators, all of our adults realize one of our important roles is making sure that we're working as role models for our students about how to treat each other, how to respect each other, and that we're also helping our students learn that. It's certainly an important part of an education. So this, again, the board is being asked to approve this later on in the agenda, and when it is approved, it then must be submitted to the executive county superintendent during the summer months. And then in the fall, we will hear the system that the state came up with to determine grades for each school.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? Jenny.
Dr. Dawn, this is a lot of data. What does it tell you?
Well,
did you draw any conclusions about where we are or any emphasis that you would like placed in certain categories? Or?
I think the exercise was a useful one because there are so many requirements of this law that it is good for the people responsible for it at the schools to make sure that we're continuing that. Okay, this is only the second year of the system. I think more data is, this year we did conduct a school climate survey for each of the schools. It is been completed now and going to the schools so that it can be reviewed. That's where there's more interesting data for each of the schools to look at and determine where there are areas where we have strengths that we could share with other schools, or where we have areas where we should focus and try to learn a bit more and help a bit more. So we're actually, we've been very excited about that. We just received the results, and that will be, each of the school safety teams is going to be reviewing those, and that's helpful. This is more compliance, very important, a first step, but the other is, I think is very powerful.
Given that I'm guessing the principals and their assistants or designees, or I guess their anti-bullying specialists, filled this out within the school environment. And when they see the full summary of all data, my hope is that they will communicate with each other to understand either procedurally or training components or process what others have done to accomplish a higher rating.
Right.
And how they can then transform their rating numbers into that category over time.
Yes. Absolutely, that has already begun, but it's already on some summer agendas to continue.
Okay. I think that is really the power of the data, aside from the fact that it has to be reported to the state, and this is the instrument that they've given us.
Yes.
We could certainly use it to learn something about individual school processes and priorities, and elevate all of them hopefully to a level of compliance and real accuracy and value.
When will the board be getting a report from the climate data?
That can certainly be in the fall. Then the principals will have it, the school safety teams will be reviewing it.
We'll look forward to it.
Jenny and I look forward to it.
All right, then, we'll all look forward to it.
All right.
Yes.
No one else. I'd ask the board to approve the minutes of the special board meeting held on June 5th, 2013, regular meeting of June 11, 2013, and the private minutes of June 5th, 2013, and June 11, 2013. Could I have a second?
Second.
Roseanne, thank you. Any comments or questions on the minutes? All those in favor?
I have to abstain.
All those
Jenny.
abstaining? Any opposed?
Yes, I'm opposed to the minutes of June 11th.
Okay, thank you.
I too am opposed. They're incomplete.
Would you like to clarify them, or do you like to move on?
Well, I just don't think they accurately reflect the conversation that was had by the board. None of the board members' comments were recorded. So they're just incomplete.
Okay. Okay, any other comments?
Everybody voted yes on June 5th, and we have 2 noes and 1 abstention on June 11th, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Personnel, Mark.
You're gonna have to bear with me, there's a couple of changes that we'll need to make here. So, I'd like the board to consider personnel motions 1 through 63. 62 and 63 were on a separate piece of paper at your table. In fact, 62 replaces number 30. And the number 62, this is the more accurate way it should be reflected. It should say the approve appointment, contract, and continuing employment for Dr. Margaret Dolan, Superintendent of Schools, for the years July 1, 2012 through June 30th, 2017, and the rest of the sentence stays the same. It just clarifies the years of the contract. So again, that 62 replaces 30. Also in number 9, we're deleting Colleen Rapparelli as the AV coordinator at Roosevelt. All of the other resolutions are accurate as was stated. Do I have a second? Jenny?
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Dolan, resignations?
There are no retirements tonight.
No retirements, all right.
That's right.
I'm so used to asking. and
I know
one
there
time
are.
I asked, I remember, there are none. Okay. Any comments or questions?
I have a quick question. Could you just describe the elementary principal coordinator?
Yes, since we have 6 elementary principals and 1 early childhood principal, so there are 7. They hold weekly meetings throughout the year to make sure that our 7 schools really, work the same on all different aspects, making sure that we're continuing the articulation, and this person coordinates all of that.
So will they help coordinate maybe HIP procedures or the Marshall Plan, like that everyone's in cohesiveness with the SGOs, and will they be responsible for that too?
That certainly follows with that. Actually, the elementary principal coordinator also happens to be the HIP coordinator. It's the same person.
Okay.
And additionally, absolutely, that group has been discussing the new evaluation system throughout the year. And it's so important that everybody is going to be implementing that the same way. So you're absolutely right. It's one of our ways where we're making sure that's the case.
I just wanted to say, I think that's great, because I know a lot of elementary schools, sometimes in districts, aren't together on the same page, even though the standards will all be the same now, because we're moving ahead with that, but a lot of times they're, on different paces with things, so to have a coordinator, which I've never, seen before, I think, from experience, that's a great, a great thing to add.
I just wanted to make two comments. One, number 52, fall coaching volunteers. The district is always thankful that individuals in the community, some who have had graduates, parents of graduates, or graduates themselves, come back and assist our coaching staff. So we thank them very much for volunteering in that capacity. And number 54 and 55, Dr. Dolan, maybe you want to make a comment about the fact that the STEM summer camp is being extended to an additional week. I think that's a real strong statement.
I would love to make that comment.
Excellent.
So this is, we have been working actually as part of our goal, one of our goals, on STEM, the integration of science, technology, engineering, and math, and exciting more children about it and giving more children information about it so that they can be excited by it and learn more in those areas. And so one of the initiatives under Paul Pinero and the district STEM committee was to offer a STEM camp over the summer. And we only made parents aware of it in May, actually. And we originally just expected to have 1 week of STEM camp, but the response has been so strong that we've expanded it to 2 weeks. And we could not be happier. And the parents are very excited about it because it just so happens they've been so excited they've been running up at odd hours to drop off their envelopes, and I've met quite a few of them. So they're very excited about it, and I'm looking forward to actually visiting the STEM camp over the summer and seeing how the students are doing. It's incredible what our young people can do when they're given the opportunity. So we're very, very happy that with our STEM committee and that Paul worked on this and that our parents are taking advantage of it.
Just piggybacking on that a second, Dr. Dolan, I think you wrote to us in our notes that students within the AP Physics class had taken the opportunity to do projects and deliver presentations to one or more elementary.
That was in the SIP notes. That was
Oh,
the
they were
committee
SIP
SIP
notes.
notes.
Okay, so they were the curriculum committee notes. Thank you, Roseanne, for letting, could you explain a little bit about that? Because that fascinated me, and I think that it's an opportunity for us to really acknowledge some of the exciting things that are being done in the curriculum and within the STEM area.
Sure. Actually, one of the things that our high school does well, I believe, is after students, students in an AP course, really one of the main goals is that AP test, which takes place in May. Now, what to do to make sure that the learning continues after the test is taken. It's not as though they're done at that point. So, for example, in physics, they worked on projects to bring to the elementary schools. And there's so many powerful things about that. For young people to see high school students who, really, who is more cool than a high school student when you're in elementary school, to see them being excited about physics, et cetera, and bringing it down and showing it, there's a real power to that. And you never know which little mind you're going to spark with that, with what you're showing them. So yes, it's great that they're doing that.
Any other comments? Okay. Dave?
Richard Masick.
Yes.
Lucy Biegler. Yes. Ann Carey.
Yes.
Mark Friedman.
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher.
Yes.
Roseanne Firstad.
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg.
Yes, except I abstain on numbers 24, 51, and 53.
24, 51, and 53.
Yes, thank you.
Rich Slater.
Yes.
Anything else? Good. All right, facilities. I'd ask the board to consider facility motion number 1. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Dana, could you just remind us why we have this, we're giving you this leeway, the facilities committee this leeway? So this is authorizing the facilities.
Reserve
It's authorizing the Facilities Committee to approve maintenance projects, price adjustments, et cetera, over the summer.
This is, because as you know, we don't have a board
Because-
meeting until
because of the rules,
August 7th,
yeah.
so, right, we'll have things that we need to get approved going forward, change orders, contracts, anything of that nature, so we need some approval before August 27th. And then anything that gets approved over the summer will be on the board agenda on August 27th for the full board to approve.
Any comments or questions? Dana?
Rich Mattesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler? Yes. Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kirstead?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Long-range planning, Jeannie?
No report.
Thank you. Policies, Gretchen?
Yes, thank you. We are going to table under Policy Motion 1, 2340 school trips and 8660 transportation by private vehicle. There were some questions raised by members of the board, so we're going to table those for tonight and bring those back at different times. So I would like to ask the full board to approve for first reading Policy 0165, voting.
Second.
We reviewed this in the normal course of reviewing the bylaws under 0000. While we were reviewing it, we took a look at the Strauss-Esme policy, and there was a section in that policy that Dr. Dolan thought would be valuable to add to our policy. That section is in red. I believe this was sent home to you a couple weeks ago in accordance with our 10-day requirement. And it just is, it more clearly sets forth what our obligation is to vote on various issues that come before the board, and what the required vote is. So does anyone have any questions on that? If not, then we can.
Rich Mattesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kirstead?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
I would ask the board to consider Policy Motion 2 to approve the submission of the school self-assessments for determining grades under the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights for all of our schools. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Okay.
Rich Mattesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kirstead?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
And finally, I would ask the board to affirm the superintendent's decisions on HIB incidents 13R05, 13WA11, 13E10, 13E11, 13E12, and 13F02 for the reasons set forth therein. Second?
Second.
Rich Mattesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kirstead?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Abstain. I was absent.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Curriculum, instruction, and programs, Roseanne.
I'd like to ask the board to approve for first reading the following curricula: General Biology, Earth Science, Physics 2, APC.
Second.
So these are all revisions, and General Biology had quite a few content revisions because the knowledge base and the content of biology is changing more so than many of the other sciences. So there is additional content in this curriculum now, which has to do with genetics and biochemistry, which it did not have before. In addition, there is an end-of-course exam that the state requires students to take, so additional material had to be added into this curriculum so students have access to that information for taking the test. They are going to also be ordering a new textbook to address the changing content of the biology knowledge, and that is in That is already in the budget. It is not additional money. So are there any questions on the biology? The earth science curriculum was revised to correlate with the New Jersey science standards, and there were some updates on objectives, the content and the scope and sequence. And there was really minor revisions on this without the content, but it was just to update it with the standards. And then the last one was AP Physics, and that was to be more in line with, again, not only the science standards, but also to be more in line with, well, to be completely in line with, not more in line with, completely in line with how the AP organizes the course and the content that is required to pass the AP exam. Are there any other questions? Okay, I guess we could vote on those.
Rich Metaxas?
Yes.
Dan Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher?
Yes.
Roseanne Kurzak?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the following overnight field trips. Westfield High, I'll just read them. Westfield High School students studying Spanish traveling to Santona, Cantabria, Spain. The proposed dates of the trip are April 4th, 2014 through April 18th, 2014. And the other one is the Westfield High School students studying French, traveling to, no idea, Lycée de la, anybody speak French? Folie, St. James, France. The proposed dates of the trip are April 4th, 2014 through April 14th, 2014. May I have a second?
Second.
Yes. Are there any questions or comments?
I think thank you to the Foreign Language Department. They did an excellent job of the last curriculum meeting I was at. We had asked for more in-depth information so that we could understand how exchange families were identified, chosen, vetted, and connected with our students. And I think they did a very strong, superior job of informing us of that. So thanks to David Greer and his teachers.
Rich Metaxas?
Yes.
Dan Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher?
Yes.
Roseanne Kurzak?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Finance, Mark?
I'd like the board to consider finance resolutions numbers 1 through 31. But just before we do that, Dana, on number 26, which was accepting following gifts, seems to be a typo on the third one. Do you happen to know what that correct number is? 1,500 or 15,000?
I think it's 1,500.
Okay. So should we,
No, it's 15,000.
is it 15,000?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so in resolution number 26, we thank the following for
Could you
gifts.
just get a second anymore?
I forgot. I don't know. Jenny, thank you. It's always good for a second. So we would accept for the following gifts to the district: a Beckendorf piano from Ms. Lori Reinart to the Fine Arts Department, $1,600 from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts for the purchase of microphones and sound equipment for the Westfield High School Music Department, and $15,000 from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts for funding to upgrade the writing and arranging MIDI lab at Westfield High School. So thank you, everybody, for your contributions. Also, just to call out to the board, among the resolutions here in finance is the sale of our bonds for the first phase of the roofs that will happen this summer for approximately $6.9 million. In the documents, you'll see the estimated maturity of the bonds over the next, is it 20 years? 15 years. So, any questions? Jenny?
Mark, I think it would be wise to point out in number 3 and 4, the allocation allocations of monies into our reserve accounts for maintenance and capital reserve funding?
These are actually just, these numbers are actually maximum amounts that we would put into the reserve account. It's not going to be anywhere near these numbers.
Okay.
Once we close out our fiscal year, which ends June 30th, and we have the final audit, the board will then decide what actual amount you want to deposit into those accounts, and this is just giving us flexibility to make that deposit.
Okay. But I think for the sake of the public's information, it's important to know that this is a consideration that the board takes very seriously. The Finance Committee has worked on trying to figure out how much money will be available, and those two reserve accounts are at a high priority for us, so that we are very interested in understanding what our needs will be and how we will be able to put money into those accounts for those needs.
Any other questions? Dana, please.
Rich Matessa.
Yes.
Lucy Beagle. Yes. Ann Carey.
Yes.
Mark Friedman.
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher.
Yes.
Roseanne Kirsten.
Yes.
Jeannie Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Rowland.
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I wanted to say something. I just wanted to also take note that, right, we just approved a bunch of grant applications that you'll be submitting to the state. The state has released some money for districts to apply for grants to help pay for facilities projects. And so we are trying to act while the iron is hot. So taking our 5-year facilities plan, Dana looked at the facilities plan and identified those projects that fall under the guise of those funds that are available, and we'll be submitting all of those grants. So hopefully we'll reap some of the benefits of that newly released money.
Thank you, Roseanne.
Anything else, Finance? Nothing. All right. I'd ask the board to note the notes for the record. So noted, which brings us to legislation. Ann?
No report.
Thank you. Unfinished business.
Oh, yes.
All right. We got
Board goals, I know. We tabled them last time.
Oh, we have to do that in public?
2 times the charm.
Yeah. Did I give out enough?
One more.
So, as you know, we agreed on the 2 goals, which are bolded on this piece of paper I just handed out. And after we come up with goals, we need to figure out what action steps we as a board would like to take so we can be sure that we are actually fulfilling and working towards achievement of these goals. The bullet points under the bolded statements are just ideas that I had to get us started thinking about the kinds of action points that might be attributed to the different goals. So I'll read the first goal. Implement mechanisms to, 1, enable more fulsome group discussion and brainstorming, and 2, increase and equalize board members' shared knowledge. So with that goal in mind, what sort of action points or what sort of things would we do? By what method will we achieve this goal, is the question. So I know we've had discussions of this in our goal-setting meeting. One was to hold committee of the whole meetings once a month, or more of workshops, where we have meetings where we don't take action. We're just learning together and giving ourselves time to really discuss issues in depth. Another thing that had been discussed is expect committee chairs to provide notes and/or in-depth board presentations of committee business. Another idea was to generate yearly and monthly board meeting topics and give to all board members, so we have an idea of what's coming up. Create a board member handbook, that was somebody's idea. Conduct at least 2 workshops run by New Jersey School Boards Association to provide us with information on topics we decide. I know roles and responsibilities was mentioned in some of our discussions. Ethics has been mentioned in some of our discussions. Communications has been mentioned in our discussions, so those are some opportunities. Perhaps, I mean, we have to decide on these. Again, these were my initial thoughts. Create committee folders for all new committee members and create binders for chairs to pass on to the next chair. So what are your thoughts on some of these action points? Do you think some are we should absolutely work towards? Do you have others? We'll just brainstorm and I'll take notes.
Ginny. Thank you. Okay, so I am definitely, Roseanne, in favor of, let's start with the ones that are easy for me. Number 2, committee chairs provide notes. And I'm assuming that is on the outcome of committee meetings.
Yes.
It's already started. We found it very helpful. I think I would love to see it stay in effect. The next one, generate yearly, monthly board meeting topics. I found it very useful a number of years ago when I was in the leadership role on the board to prepare an annual template of required topics. And I think that that would be helpful to all board members. It gives us an understanding of the flow of the business throughout the year. There are certain requirements that we have to review, reports, provide them to the state, approve them. And we would know, all members would then have more comfort in knowing in advance topically what discussions were coming up on a regular basis. So I would be very much in favor of that. I support at least 2 workshops, whether run by New Jersey school boards or facilitated internally annually. It's a critical element. I have been in favor of that throughout my tenure on the board. I don't care so much about committee folders passed along. I think that people get their own rhythm and sense of management of the topics and discussions of their committees. So once we have security in our meeting notes, over time, I think that could potentially guide the next chair. Perhaps we as committee chairs will develop our own templates for useful information, whether it's goal setting for each individual year, and that then carries forward. I think it's always worthwhile to have a sitting board member on a committee be the chair in the next period of time. So I don't know that the continuity requires something more specific and rigorous, but that's certainly up for debate.
Yeah, my only thought about that is that I don't know what it has to look like, but I do know that as a relatively new chair of a committee that we have to be mindful of when we have new people come on.
Yes.
And that some sort of orientation does have to happen, and whether that happens at the beginning of a committee meeting or it happens prior to that. I did a really lousy job transitioning Lucy onto the policy committee, and so it's just something that...
No, but I agree that it would be great, because then I wouldn't have taken up the whole meeting asking you to explain ESME and, all those other terms that you and Barbara helped me out with, because...
So it's just whether that's something that happens at the new board member orientation or it's something that happens on a committee level. I think it's definitely something that we need to keep on our radar.
Mm-hmm. What did you have in mind, Roseanne, for create a board member handbook? That's a real
I don't think
broad
somebody
topic.
mentioned that on our evaluation. I thought it was a neat idea, so I mean, I could tell you what I had.
I could gain use of one.
Well,
I wish we
that's
had
where
one.
time.
By the time it's done, you might not be.
I know, I'm not sure, maybe, the, NJSB websites, the ethics, the list of,
Just basic
the
procedures,
bylaws, maybe.
yeah.
I mean, they get it all, they get it all, but maybe if we put it in one place, it's more accessible. Maybe it's electronic, I don't know, but it was.
School Boards has a series of little books on
Yes.
this topic
Yes.
that we could purchase, the set of books for each board member, might actually do what you.
I think it'd be worthwhile to take a look at their
Ah.
publication list.
Yeah.
Because that, I showed you my boardsmanship book years ago. It's very helpful. Outstanding publications. They
Okay,
really
and
have
that might
put that tremendous resources.
And then maybe if, I mean, I don't know what they look like, but maybe that's what each new board member gets, is the collection of those little booklets, and maybe there's an addendum that are district-specific information that, like the organization chart, like the school calendar, like, just, I don't know.
I think that arrives with the orientation, doesn't it?
It does, but it's very overwhelming.
It is.
It is overwhelming. It takes time to sort it out. So going back to the first item, hold committee of the whole meetings once a month, I am in favor of that as exploring that topic that might help the board and the public in a non-decision outcome meeting environment where we could explore a topic.
So is that the same as a workshop? Is that what we were saying when we were at the board
I
goals?
don't think so. No, not in my mind.
Well, it's an informal,
No, it's formal.
it's just, well, it's, not formal like this.
Yeah.
We're just talking about topics we would like to discuss or bring up
No.
and not vote on, no? Then can you explain it?
I kind of see the workshop as more of a time for us to learn together. And the committee of the whole, oh my. The committee of the whole is a place where we discuss topics in more depth and more freely, let's say, but we're not making any action. at the
Topics that
committee of the whole.
already have been brought up or new topics?
Topics that are on the agenda in the
Right,
next meeting.
Right, it's not like we would just come and say, okay, what's on your mind? It might be, we want to talk about the new kindergarten wraparound program that was, we just started.
I
Maybe
got
we
it.
would have had a committee of the whole meeting to really just talk about it.
So workshop would be more to bring up ideas?
No, workshop is more like learning together about roles and responsibilities,
bring up
about
ideas
finance.
When do we bring up ideas?
But I mean,
I need that school board's member book.
Yes. Ideas should be brought to the leadership of the board or any committee chair.
Got it.
For possible discussion, either at a committee level or for consideration as to where it would fit within the scope of board action.
Who sets the agenda? How would the agenda be set for the committees of the whole?
I guess it would be,
My sense is that it would be a walkthrough of the agenda for the next meeting. And it would be an understanding. This is what I have observed.
Oh, that's interesting.
Observed, I think that's the way the town council manages it.
Really?
It's-
Okay.
It's
That's
the
cool.
walkthrough and the discussion of the agenda of the meeting to come, where the topics are vetted, where deep conversation can take place, where preliminary discovery and presentation is made prior to public review of all the information. But I'd have to take a look at it, because I haven't talked to a lot of boards that have this as their operational template.
That means our regular board meetings should be done in like half an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's, I was
We
just
do
gonna
all the
say,
time.
because you're doing it
Committee of the
twice
whole.
then.
Exactly.
Well,
Well,
actually,
there's a pro forma
that-
expectation of the public meeting that the information has been vetted previously.
that's really interesting, because I hadn't really envisioned it that way. I mean, I have heard, and I've spoken to other boards who've done it that way, but when we've been talking about it, that was not that was not my understanding of what people wanted or were looking for.
I think it'd be worthwhile to figure out what other boards do and what would benefit us, because I really don't know.
Yeah.
Personally, I haven't done the research. I don't.
All right, so is that something we would like to keep as an action point, as something to look into? I mean, we don't have to start it right away, I guess, but, or we can. I mean, I know one we had talked at our initial board setting meeting about having one on finance, but maybe that's the workshop, but not the committee of the whole.
Would you like
Right.
long-range planning to look into it? We can go out and contact districts and ask them, you know, who does it, what they do, how it's managed. I mean, we could start some.
Okay.
Sure. Start some administrative contacts.
Okay, does anybody have other ideas? Like, did they have other directions that they thought this goal might take?
Well, so where do you do the brainstorming that
Yeah,
Lucy was talking about?
Because I thought that's what we had discussed, that there are one time where we are,
So maybe that, maybe we do that at one
Like,
or two.
where
of
do
the
you
committee
develop
of the wholes.
ideas for new business? We almost never have anything under new business.
Under board goals, setting district goals. Basically, we should be going through a whole analysis of strengths and weaknesses and what rises to the top and where should we be focusing our time and district resources.
But I kind of envision, board goals as something you do once a year, and then you kind of work towards completing the board goals. I think, I've been thinking of, well, what happens in October when, you're sitting around and you come up with an idea? Where do you introduce them and get complete board discussion around it? Because you can do it in a committee meeting, obviously, but then, then you have to do it in the committee meeting, then you have to report out, and you just don't get that same level of input from everybody.
Well, is it programmatic or is it,
I don't know.
does it require resources? And, so it could start in a committee, it could be investigated within the structure that we have. It could be investigated through contact with the leadership or Dr. Dolan.
But
I mean, good ideas are always needed and welcome.
That's more of the understanding that I had for committee of the whole when we had our conversation, now that
It was
it's.
when
And
we were in
like,
the-
we also talked like maybe even having a committee of the whole to discuss the strategic plan,
yeah.
right?
We were in the library, those little chairs. I remember, because it was late, and we were saying that it would be great if we could discuss as a whole ideas, or just for once, are you laughing at me?
No.
Oh. Just discuss as a whole for once, just brainstorm, rattle off, ideas, and it would be public, but it wasn't anything that we voted on. So that's what that's why, and I remember they were called workshops, so that's why I was confused about.
I think they are two different things.
Right.
Although their purpose is different, but it is the entire board getting together in public where we do not take action.
Right. But that was the
So,
brainstorming
but there
that
are
Mark was
two
referring to.
Two
So
different.
it sounds to me like we're talking about three different things, actually.
no.
We're talking about, whatever this committee of the whole can look like, I guess we need more information about what that can look like or what it should look like. And then there's the workshops, which is an opportunity for us to learn together. So it's not it's a topic about just being a better board. How do we do our job? But then there's also, I think, a real need for us to brainstorm, to really kind of flesh things out sometimes. And I guess what I've never been entirely clear on is whether that, I was under the impression that we could, I know that if we have a quorum, then we have to be in public. But is there an annual opportunity for us to have like a retreat almost? To
Board
like
goal setting.
the board, but that also has to be in public.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, but generally, it's not all that interesting.
It's not well attended.
It's not.
No,
well
and I
attended.
appreciate that. I'm just trying to get a sense
Could be on a
of.
Saturday afternoon.
But you can, in the past, certainly, there have been times where we've had board retreats. It's not as though people went away to a cabin in the woods, but somewhere went off-site to really have time to focus and, yeah.
And as long as we provide the proper notice, that's
Yes.
something that we can
So
do.
that might be one of the action points we want. Have a retreat.
Which doesn't really address Mark's point, which is as issues, that might be an annual thing, but then as issues come up through the year, what's the mechanism for fleshing those out? And it sounds like we have to take it through the administration, through the leadership, let it bubble up in the normal course of things.
Unless we choose to try out committee of the whole meetings, not all the time, but maybe we have one committee of the whole, meeting in the fall where we're brainstorming ideas. And we have one
Right, I was
committee.
gonna say, it doesn't have to be one way or the other.
Right,
Maybe
right.
when there's a ton of agenda items, it could be what Ginny had
Right.
suggested.
Right.
Because it's a lot to go over alone.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
then maybe certain times of the year, like September, or maybe the end of the year, things to implement for the following year, we can have idea suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it doesn't have to be the same every month, but I mean, I guess long-range planning can look into what other school boards do.
Okay. But when is long-range planning going to do that? Do you, is that gonna be, are we suggesting that long-range planning do that for the year? Or are we suggesting like in the fall we'll know something, I mean,
Well, we can look
right,
into
I don't know.
Well, we can parcel out some things and do some research, but
Okay.
it's summer.
Right, I know, well, that's why I'm asking.
Committees generally don't want to meet during
Right.
the summer. I mean, I'm around, but
Yeah.
we could get some stuff going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Because
can
I'd
look
like
into it.
to, I personally would like to start holding the committee of the whole meetings in the fall.
Of course. But they have to be well understood. Objectives have to be well understood. Because presumably we would be giving up other
Well, can't we
agenda.
Our first committee of the whole meeting could be about how do we want to run the committee of the whole meeting.
Don't waste my time, Roseanne. I don't know about that. No.
Can we discuss this on August 27th?
What?
Can't we discuss this on August 27th, so it's set for
Yes,
September?
of course we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Moving right along.
Okay. So, let's move on to number 2, is embed assessment into significant board actions. The parentheses I just added for clarification, but that's not the goal. That's why it's not bolded. And then again, the bullets underneath. There were 2 sections. I delineated this goal for 2 sections for follow-up on actions we've already taken. And then maybe moving forward, we would create questions or standard questions or follow-up processes for future actions. And again, this is just my ideas to get us started. So if other people have different directions that they thought this should go, by all means. So what are your thoughts?
Maybe when something is voted on, like tonight we voted on the SRO.
Yeah.
So in 6 months, it would just automatically be on the agenda
Okay.
for a follow-up. So that would just be the standard way of us following up on it.
So that might even play into perhaps the first, one of the action steps in the first goal, which is generating a yearly and monthly calendar. So we've made we've made an action, and now it's gonna go on the calendar.
Right.
So, okay.
Will the calendar include items that come up on the policy level? Like for instance, in SIP we talked about the science resource room. And we acknowledged as a committee that it was something that we kind of wanted, that it was something that we needed to continue to think about and talk about. So can we use the calendar in that way so that when there's transition, I don't know.
I think that's the chair's responsibility in the committee, and hopefully when they pass on, that if that chair is not chair anymore, they would pass on that information. These are things going forward, but maybe that's something we create, like Ginny had said, a template for goals. Maybe it's part of a template for goals, a templates for, things still under investigation, or things that requiring follow-up. I don't know.
Gretchen, my calendar was more in superintendent report topics.
Right, no, I understood that, but
Okay.
I also thought that we were gonna like we just said, if every 6 months there's a major issue that comes up, we're gonna put it on the calendar to review. So I guess I was just trying to think about stuff that comes up on the lower level as well.
We also had discussed too, you know, like if we could program the calendar, so like in 6 months, review this policy, or remember we were talking something about that?
Right, but I think what Roseanne is saying, that that's the chair of whatever committee, that's who needs to follow up on it.
So I'd actually like to take that concept a step further.
Which
And
concept?
the assessment concept of a 6 month later after a program institution, some kind of reaction to how we doing. I would like to know as a board member, when we vote on a program, what our expectations are for the assessment. What will constitute some evaluation criteria or process or?
I agree. And that's what I meant by create standard questions and follow-up processes for future actions.
Oh.
But expectations for assessment.
Okay. So in light of the outcome of tonight's vote on the SRO, my question really is, and if we use a time frame of 6 months from September, let's say, in, what is that, March? Which is a long time, but maybe we want to hear back in January, so that we can look at it from a budget perspective earlier than March, because budget's always, you know, there's always a budget timing, a fiduciary timing thing. What would we want to know, understand, evaluate? And so maybe in September, we could ask the administration to come to us and tell us, as you're part of the assessment process, what can you look at and how can you measure the outcome? Knowing that this is a very unusual situation because of the partnership component of the police department and the ownership of the resource. But still, there are expectations for the working relationship within this, within the high school and within the staff and the administration. The functionality of being supported, as we said, multifaceted, very broad. But we would want to know what pieces are in place and working, and where does emphasis have to be put, and how is the reaction, and, you know, what's the outreach and so forth. So I would suggest that that might be a reasonable way to start.
So we can add here, SRO. Anything? Okay, so I'll clean it up. Maybe, assign tasks, like the long-range planning is doing something. I guess Rich and I and Dr. Dolan are doing the calendar. And contact the New Jersey School Boards Association. But, okay.
Okay. I'll send something out to long range, and we'll divide up get some questions, the essential questions for what we want to know in place. Try to map them, and then try to do some research.
All right, you done?
Yeah.
All right, any other unfinished business? Any new business? Technology Committee reports, Mitch.
Yes, I just thought I'd give you an update of what's happening in the summer and what we hope to get done the summer and the fall projects. Thank Brian Walker for providing this. Briefly, some of the summer projects that'll get done before September, we're replacing the existing wide area network connections between the schools and putting in private fiber. We're replacing the core network switch that controls the entire district data network. The old core switch is over 10 years old and can't handle the current and future speeds of our network. So this is really critical. It's going to give us much faster speed and expendability. Installing new firewall filtering software and network security hardware and software, which will really help to fortify our network against external and internal attacks. We're installing 30 new computers in Computer Lab Room 131 at the high school to replace the old PCs. We're installing 30 new computers in the library at Roosevelt. In the summer and the fall projects, this will be done hopefully early September. 1 new laptop cart with 30 laptops for each elementary school and intermediate school. 2 new laptop carts with 30 laptop carts for the high school. This is big. 150 plus new laptops for high school teachers. 140 plus new laptops for elementary classrooms with smart boards to replace old computers connected to smart boards, and 70 plus new laptops for intermediate school classrooms. Same situation with the smart boards to replace old computers connected to smart boards. So money's going to work. Good stuff.
That's great.
Sounds awesome.
Yep. Very exciting.
Liaison reports? Recognize the public for questions and/or comments. On any topic.
Anybody left?
Anybody?
Seeing no
Hello.
one, seeing no one come to the podium, I'd ask the board approve the following resolutions. Resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, personnel, pending or anticipated litigation, and pending or anticipated contract negotiations, and be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Have a second?
Second.
Roseanne, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Meeting is adjourned.